Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, we're calling the meeting to order and the first business is swearing in.
Okay, Councilmember Hamilton, if you don't mind rising and raising your right hand. I'm going to say I, and I say I, you would say I, and then say his name, and then after that, if you repeat after me. I
Tom Hamilton,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of California,
and the Constitution of California,
and I take this obligation freely
and I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
Well done.
Congratulations.
Okay, and the next item is roll call. And do we need a separate item regarding an approval of 2449?
I believe we don't, because I don't believe that anybody is asserting emergency circumstances. I think we're doing a standard teleconference, so I think we're okay.
We'll just do a roll call.
San Mateo County,
Not here.
San Mateo County. Thank you. Atherton,
Rick DeGolia.
thank you. Belmont, Julia Bates. Brisbane, Colleen Mackin. Burlingame. You're on mute.
Yes, yep.
Colma,
Take the vote.
Daly City.
That's Magdala.
East Palo Alto,
I've got it.
Foster City. Half Moon Bay,
Harvey, you are back.
Hillsborough,
Leslie Ragsdale,
Los Banos. Menlo Park,
Betsy Nash.
Foster City. Thank you. Just going back there. Millbrae, Pacifica,
Tiger Jazz Pro Big Center.
Portola Valley,
Jeff Alps.
Redwood City,
Homer Martinez.
San Bruno,
Tom Hamilton.
thank you. San Carlos,
John Newton.
San Mateo,
And then three.
South San Francisco,
James Pullman.
Woodside. And we have a quorum, thank you.
Okay, and the next item on the agenda is public comment. And we have a special public comment from Eva Chen. Donna, would you like to introduce Eva Chen?
Yes, I would. Well, everyone, we are delighted to have Eva Chen here today. She's a senior at Burlingame High, and she is also the recently retired youth poet in residence. She has won the Princeton Prize in Race Relations, Certificate of Accomplishment, and will be heading off to Yale this fall for college. And she came because this is Poetry Month. I'm sure most of you may know that. And while we were still celebrating Poetry Month, she has written a beautiful poem around sustainability and how that impacts our lives. And so we have her today as our guest to read her poem to start our meeting off in celebration of Poetry Month. Welcome, Eva.
Yeah, can everyone hear me okay? Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. So thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm just going to read a quick poem. And Donna, thank you so much for the introduction. A lesson from my mother about the origins of life. My mother tells me all things are cheaper than their worth because we all came from the same dusty asteroid, eroded from space, spinning in the ether. Everything built from stardust and helium borrowed from the heavens, molded like clay, dead or living. We are as expensive as air. It is stupid to believe anything belongs to something when all we own are electrons orbiting a nuclear mass suspended from the laws of physics. After we die and our bodies become hollow like bags, organs rusted like shells, and muscles weak like sand, where will we return? She asks. Only up, she says. Only up. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva.
Thank you, Eva. It's so nice to have you here today. And thank you all for granting us the opportunity to share that beautiful work with her and start our meeting off on such a lovely sentiment today.
Great. Okay, the next item on the agenda is to set the agenda and to approve the consent items. And I've got two announcements regarding that. One is we're going to move items 10 and 11 ahead of item 9. So 10 will become 9, and 11 will become 10, and item 9 will become 11. With respect to the consent items, one of the consent items is approval of a consulting agreement with Jan when she goes into retirement. And I think David sent a copy of that draft to everybody that included a very brief notice from me that the subcommittee that has been the CEO transition subcommittee worked very hard with Jan to put that contract together. It was a very friendly deal. And I think it's really in our benefit to have Jan available to our new CEO over this period of time after she retires, so that she can share the depth of her knowledge and experience and perspective in the industry, which is really quite enormous. And if you ever sit on one of the interviews between our staff and the CPUC, which Jan attends all of them, you will see the depth of that knowledge and experience. It's quite remarkable. So, and if anybody has any questions about that or wants to pull anything off the consent agenda, please let me know.
Yeah, Chair, I would like to pull 4.1 off the agenda for the discussion. 4.1, the item you were just talking about.
Okay. Okay, no problem. Okay, we'll pull that off the consent. And can I get a motion to, does anyone else want to pull anything off? Okay. I guess I didn't finish public comment, did I? Sorry about that. Okay, let's see if there's any public comment before we set the agenda. I don't see any public comment in the room. Is there any public comment online?
If anybody would like to give public comment online, if you'll please raise your hand.
Okay, I don't see any public comment online. So now we'll go forward. If anybody from the public wishes to pull any item from the consent agenda, you're able to do that also. I don't see anybody indicating that in the room or online. So can I get a motion to set the revised agenda?
I will move to set the agenda and approve items 1, 2, 3, and 5.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Second.
Second, okay.
Who was the second? Sorry. Thank you. San Mateo County?
Yes.
Thank you, sorry. Atherton?
Yes.
Belmont? Yes. Brisbane?
Yes.
Burlingame?
Yes.
Colton? Daly City?
Yes.
East Palo Alto?
Yes.
Foster City?
Yes.
Half Moon Bay?
Yes.
Hillsborough?
Yes.
Los Banos? Menlo Park?
Yes.
Millbrae?
Aye.
Pacifica?
Yes.
Portola Valley?
Yes.
Redwood City? San Bruno?
Yes.
San Carlos?
Yes.
San Mateo?
Yes.
South San Francisco?
Yes.
And Woodside. Thank you, and the motion passes.
Okay, great. So now we'll go forward to deal with the item that was pulled from consent, the consulting agreement. Did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First, I was, this draws into relief that Jan's departure date would just be 2 months from now. Can I get a brief update on where we're at on that executive search?
Sure. We announced the CEO opening on our website, and I think that's been announced at a couple board meetings. We hired a executive search consultant to help us with that. And we received 10 resumes, 4 of whom we think are very qualified, and we're beginning to do those interviews. Timing wise, we want to get the consulting agreement done, that we just closed the opening for the CEO search this week. So the first interview is tomorrow.
Okay, and if we don't have luck closing a candidate in time, is there an interim plan, or would Jan, would you intend to continue, or?
Well, the game plan is to close someone over the next month. And with the quality of candidates we received, we haven't interviewed them yet, so I can't say it looks like that's gonna definitely be doable, but I believe it's doable. We got very good candidates. And I think we'll have somebody, of course, we've got to negotiate a contract too, so there's a couple stages we got to go through to get there. And right now, we're in good hands. Jan's the CEO. And if there's a change, then we'll deal with that.
Got it. No, thank you for the update. I
No
appreciate
problem.
that. And with regard to the specific item, you know, Jan, I obviously have the utmost respect for your position and would, you know, think you in transition would be ideal, of course. I frankly did find the economics a little bit surprising. If I read this right, it looked like roughly the same compensation that she receives now, but for 25% of the work. Is that one week a month or 40 hours a month?
Yeah, it's less compensation than she receives now.
Okay,
So the compensation is $15,000 a month, and I can't do the math in my head, but her salary is $425,000 a year.
okay, so 360 to 425.
Yeah, but you gotta understand, consulting arrangements are always more expensive than employee arrangements.
Yeah, I do understand that. Usually 2x is not a bad rule of thumb. This is probably 3.5. And then my only other concern was that it's fixed, that it's mandatory payout over the 6 months. Wouldn't you want to leave that to the discretion of the new CEO, whether they want to renew it every month or maybe make it on an hourly basis, just to have it fixed for 6 months?
We wanted to minimize the administrative piece to it, and it is on a monthly basis. So it's set for 6 months, but it's terminable with 30 days notice.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
Okay,
so if the new CEO wishes to terminate it, they could do that, or if Jan wishes to terminate it, she could do that.
okay, perfect. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So that makes me a lot more comfortable.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you. Just questions I had. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. Good questions. Any other questions? Okay, then can I get a motion to approve the consulting agreement?
So moved.
Thank you, Carlos.
I'll second.
Okay.
It's hard.
Oh, that was Harvey.
I raised my hand. If I was voting.
That's an art.
I'm open to it.
Second, Ms. Braxton?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect.
San Mateo County?
Yes.
San Mateo County? Oh, okay. Atherton?
Yes.
Thank you. Belmont? Yes. Brisbane?
Yes.
Burlingame?
Yes.
Colma? Daly City?
Yes.
East Palo Alto?
Yes, and thank you, Jen.
Foster City?
Yes.
Half Day?
Yes.
Hillsborough?
Yes.
Los Banos? Menlo Park?
Yes.
Millbrae?
Aye.
Pacifica?
Yes.
Portola Valley?
Yes.
Redwood City?
Yes.
San Bruno?
Yes.
San Carlos?
Yes.
San Mateo?
Yes.
South San Francisco?
Yes.
And Woodside. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is the chair report. The report I was going to give was where we're at in the course of the CEO interviews. So I've already done that. The only other item is, and maybe this is in Jan's report, you're reporting on the conference next month?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll have nothing else to report. Next report is your report.
Okay, and I have
a relatively long report, so thank you for your patience. If we go to the first slide, please. So I'm going to go give you some staffing updates, talk about our all-staff in-person meeting we had this week, legislative update. That was going to be changed, but an update on a ruling by the Ninth Circuit Court, Cal CCA conference, and upcoming meetings. So next slide, please. So I wanted to let you know that Christina Cordero, who was our CFO, her last day was last Thursday. And Andy Stern, our previous CFO, is serving as our interim CFO. So now you know.
And we're doing a search. Right.
We will start a search. I believe it's that the new CEO should hire this person. So Andy, our agreement with Andy is that he'll stay on for 6 months in an interim part-time basis. And that should give us sufficient time for the new CEO to bring on either a CFO or a director of finance. Next slide, please. So we have currently posted on the website openings for power resources analyst and specialist. And actually we have filled one of those positions with Shayna Barnes, who is moving over from the account services group to the power resources group. But you'll be hearing from Shayna tonight on the DEAI item. And we're hiring a couple other analysts in the power resources team. We also have 6 summer intern positions that were posted. So this is the first time that we've really gone full hog to bring some interns in. There are a lot of projects that we've identified, and we're excited to bring some college or graduate students in to help us this summer. And then we will soon be posting position for a senior manager of local power development and an account services specialist to backfill Shayna's position. Next slide, please. And this is us. Can you believe this, how big we are? I can't, there's 37 people. Are you in that picture?
No, I didn't make the picture.
Oh,
I didn't make the cut.
so, Photoshop you. Yeah, we can Photoshop you in. So on Tuesday, we had our quarterly all-staff in-person meeting. We have these at Allied Arts in Menlo Park. Lovely venue. Thank you, Betsy, for having such a great place in Menlo Park. And we had a great meeting. It's always wonderful to have the whole team together, and it's just an amazing group of people. We covered lots of items there. I talked to them about the CEO transition plan and the timing for that, what's going on in finance. We are launching our cost of service study. In fact, I signed the contract for that today. We talked about budget preparation, what our org chart looks like, and I'll share that with you probably next meeting. Why Los Banos became a part of the PCE goings on regarding the independent system operator and possible regionalization, and also some legislative updates. And then Roy Shu, our new Power Resources Director, gave an Energy 101 talk, similar to what he presented at the board orientation meeting that some of you were at. We also talked about how to transition our Eco 100 product, which is 100% renewable, did some brainstorming about what would that product possibly look like once we become 100% renewable in 2025. We also had a behind the scenes look at account services that Leslie and her team led. And then we had a Q&A with our programs team. Catherine Hansen, our new human resources manager, talked about new benefits that we're offering, starting with an EAP program, which is wonderful, and also focusing on career development and training for our staff. And then we ended it with a volunteering event that Nellie organized for the Samaritan House. We put together 400 hygiene kits for them to provide to their clientele. So that was a nice team building event and also helping to give back to the community. And as I mentioned, we had our board orientation back on March 29th, and there were 11 people here or on Zoom, and it was really great. There were great questions asked, and it was really fun to get everyone together. And there are videos on our website with high-level refreshers for everyone about what what each of our teams do. And those videos are about 5 to 10 minutes each, so you can just hop in and watch whatever you want to watch for all the different teams that we have here at PCE. Can you go to the next slide, please? I wanted to give you a legislative update. There are focusing specifically on 3 bills that have moved ahead in the state legislature since you got your monthly legislative report in your packet. The first is SB 537, sponsored by our local senator, Josh Becker. And this is to address the ability of board members of multi-jurisdictional bodies like ours to attend meetings virtually from undisclosed remote locations. This was heard in the Senate Committee on Governance and Finance on April 19th. And our Vice Chair Donna Colson was a lead witness, and it was aided by her strong testimony that the bill passed that committee by a vote of 6-2. We also greatly appreciate the many letters of support for this bill that your jurisdictions have sent in. These include Atherton, Brisbane, Burlingame, Colma, Foster City, San Bruno, San Carlos, San Mateo, South San Francisco, Menlo Park Councilmember Betsy Nash, and Hillsborough Councilmember Leslie Ragsdale. And in addition to local support letters, and official support has also been lodged by the League of California Cities, Cal CCA, Streets for All, Los Angeles County Sanitation Districts, and other CCAs, Sonoma Clean Power and San Diego Community Power. Opposition to the bill has come from the ACLU, California Publishers, Cal Aware, California Broadcasters Association, First Amendment Coalition, Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, and the Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. And at the insistence of the Committee on Governance and Finance, several amendments to the bill were made. And the one of greatest significance is that the bill was amended so that virtual participation has been limited to board members who reside more than 40 miles from the venue in which the meeting is being held. So that would mean that only our Los Banos council member would be able to benefit from this, and no one else here would be able to. SB 537 is set to be heard by the Senate Committee on the Judiciary this coming Tuesday, May 2nd. And note, there were several other bills that would amend the Brown Act that were also introduced, including one authored by Assemblymember Diana Pappen, AB 1379. But that bill was pulled from consideration by the author before it was heard in committee. So the second bill I wanted to talk about is AB 1373, authored by Assemblymember Garcia. And in the legislative report that you received in the packet, we talked about the governor having introduced a budget trailer bill earlier this year that had significant issues of concern to our industry. And in that budget proposal, the governor seeks to broaden the scope of procurement by enabling the Department of Water Resources to act as a central procurement entity. And that bill also adds a capacity payment penalty for resource adequacy deficiencies and further seeks to clarify the Public Utilities Commission Integrated Resource Plan authority over CCAs. So we and our trade association, Cal CCA, have met with legislators and administration officials to move this from the budget bill, which would not allow sufficient hearings on it, to a policy bill. And we were successful in that. And just last week, AB 1373 was introduced. However, we still have concerns with the substance of this bill, and we filed a letter taking the position of oppose unless amended. And along with the municipal utilities, Cal CCA provided the lead testimony expressing our concerns with the bill. And a copy of the correspondence will be included in your next packet. So our letter questioned the need for a central procurement entity because that's what we do. We have procurement authority. We don't like the idea of a central procurement entity. Rather, they should be focusing on interconnection and transmission We also expressed our opposition to giving the Public Utilities Commission expanded jurisdiction over CCA procurement autonomy with regard to the integrated resource plan that we file. And we also raised objections to the proposed capacity payment penalty for resource adequacy deficiencies. So yesterday, this bill passed the Assembly Committee on Utilities and Energy. And the next step is it will go to the Committee on Appropriations before heading to the floor of the Assembly. And we'll continue to work to get this bill changed to what we feel was what it should be. And then lastly, AB 538, introduced by Assemblymember Holden, is a renewed effort by Assemblymember Holden to move California away from the California Independent System Operator as the manager of our state's electric grid, and in its place join a multi-state regional transmission system. So proponents have argued that a regional system could accelerate California's ability to meet its clean energy goals, ensure the reliability of the grid, and enable the system to scale up to meet the needs of the state's customers. It's also been noted that a regional system will be more transparent around energy prices and emissions while saving money. Opponents say that joining a regional transmission system would dilute California's ability to meet those very same needs and diminish our voice on critical clean energy issues. And a significant concern is the impact the regional system would have on California utility workers. This was heard yesterday on the Assembly Committee on Utilities and Energy. It passed out of the committee after the author, Assemblymember Holden, agreed to park the legislation and make it a 2-year bill to allow for time to work through the concerns of bill opponents. From our perspective, as PCE, we believe that a regional ISO would be of benefit to us. And in fact, last week, CalCCA organized a meeting with Elliot Mainzer, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the CAISO, and talking about what the CAISO needs to do. Since we want to bring in some out-of-state resources, we are constrained right now by transmission and the ability to bring in out-of-state resources. If we were in a regional system, it would be much more easy to bring those resources in and less expensive. Additionally, there's another ISO called the Southwest Power Pool, which is now offering competitive products to non-California entities and load-serving entities. And it's putting pressure on the ISO to be able to compete. So if those entities move to the Southwest Power Pool and trade in that ISO and not in the California ISO, that's going to be not so great for California. So anyway, we'll keep watching that. It's very much a political issue because right now the California has complete governance control of the ISO. If it was to expand into a regional entity, then we would need to share that governance with other states, and that would be a big change. Any questions on any of that? I know that was a lot, I'm sorry it was so long, but I'm going to add more. But wait. Next slide, please. So in your packet, in my CEO report, I gave a summary about this Ninth Circuit Court ruling on natural gas hookups. And a couple of weeks ago, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit issued a ruling in favor of the California Restaurants Association. And in doing so, invalidated the city of Berkeley's ordinance prohibiting gas hookups for new construction. And so, we're looking at that what we did as far as reach codes with your jurisdictions is different because the reach codes are based on local building code enhancements as opposed to using local police power in relation to health and safety, which is what Berkeley did. So it's different, and it's unclear that this ruling would have any effect on the reach codes adopted by the county and the cities, but we're watching this and conferring with other agencies. And in the report that I sent, there's a copy of the ruling, a link to the ruling, and some analysis from the Columbia Law School. Next.
Any questions on that?
Oh,
Okay.
okay. So the Cal CCA conference is coming up very soon. Next time we all meet, it will have happened. And the theme is powered by community. It's going to be May 17th to 19th in San Diego. And on the 19th, there's an elected officials luncheon. The last time we were all together for Cal CCA conference, which I think was in Redondo Beach, right? We had the first elected officials luncheon. And it was a great opportunity for board members from different CCAs to meet each other and to figure out ways that you all can better work together to really influence legislation and regulations. So we encourage you to attend. I think you're attending, Rick, and right?
I'm attending.
And I don't know if others of you have signed up, but we will pay your expenses to go down to San Diego. And there's a lot of other interesting things going on at the conference. So you're encouraged to attend.
And if I could just add, when we last met, which maybe was 2019.
Yes.
I think that was the last time that we had this. We had an elected officials luncheon that was called by board members at various CCAs. And the purpose of calling that meeting was to allow for interconnection between board members, which we generally don't have. The CEOs of all the CCAs meet through the Cal CCA organization, but there's no mechanism in Cal CCA for board members from different CCAs to meet. So several of us, Rick Benil was involved in this along with myself. We set this up to try to enable board members to meet, not just to talk about legislation, but to talk about what we thought would be important for us to conference with one another about. And particularly important since it was the board members who really launched the CCAs in each of their jurisdictions. So we wanted more of that strategic interconnection between board members. Cal CCA was very focused on the legislative side of the world, and that's what kind of came out of it. But there was quite a bit of discussion about what we as board members could do with one another if we had an opportunity to interact more. So anyone who might be able to go to the conference, I would strongly encourage you to do so and to participate in this elected officials luncheon, because I think there is a real issue of being able to connect. And this is essentially connecting with other city council members who sit on the boards of the CCAs, just as all of us are. But it gives us the opportunity to interact with one another on the subject matter of this organization and the other CCA energy organizations in California, which we all know is important.
Thank you, Rick. Okay, then I think the last slide is upcoming meetings. And I just want to point out that May 8th is the executive committee. Originally, the audit and finance committee was scheduled to meet that day. That has been canceled, and it's going to be the next week, May 16th at 10 o'clock here. And then we'll see all of you here again on May 25th for our next board meeting. So that's all I have. Any questions or clarifications? Okay, thank you. And it's great to see all of you. It's so fun to be back together.
And let me just see, is there any public comment on Jan's report? I don't see any public comment in the room or online, so we'll move on. The next item is the Citizens Advisory Committee report. And I see Cheryl.
Thank you. Good evening, Honorable Chair DeGolia and members of the board. Our committee met Thursday, April 13th, and I shared that Ed Love of Half Moon Bay had resigned from the CAC. We welcomed a report from Shana Barnes, Operations Specialist, and Kirsten Andrews Schwinn, Senior Manager of Community Relations, on development of the DEAI plan and of proposed actions. Members and board liaisons offered thoughtful suggestions, including ask employees undergoing performance reviews to evaluate their work in the context of DEAI criteria identified in the action plan. Include CAC input in early program development. Fill the DEAI lead role, which is mentioned in the report, with a dedicated DEAI staff person or consultant to increase your capacity to implement the plan. and ask for feedback from environmental justice nonprofits working in the energy sector and from labor representatives. The committee voted unanimously to make this recommendation to the board. The CAC endorses the DEAI action plan with the expectation that it may be tweaked with these suggestions. 1, incorporate DEAI into individual and organizational goals. 2, report out to the CAC with the same cadence that you report to the board. 3, offer DEAI training to CAC members. 4, clarify who has access to self-ID data and how it will be used. 5, incorporate DEAI language in job postings. And 6, incorporate DEAI in all messaging, meetings, and outreach materials. Next, Jerry Gottheil, Senior Manager of Marketing Communications, shared interesting research done with 1,000 customers and how his team used the research to develop messaging for your all-electric campaign. The CAC is very interested in our role as communicating about PCE and outreach in this topic. Results showed that PCE will be wise to promote the health and safety benefits of electrification as well as efficiency using case studies. The campaign, incorporating email, website content, search ads, social media, and the All Electric Leader Awards, began last summer and draws thousands to your website each month looking for electrification and programming content. Jerry said the campaign will include direct mail this quarter and broadcast promotion starting in July. Value propositions that the marketing team identified include one that we can all share with our networks. Going electric is the smart and healthy choice for you, your family, and the environment for generations to come. Member Brandon Chan asked about translating campaign messages into other languages. Member Desiree Thayer suggested encouraging customers to open mailers by co-branding them with their city. And board member Colleen Mackin suggested reminding customers that they save money buying PCE clean energy. Kirsten Andrew Schwinn shared a list of proposed working groups for the coming year, and the committee's response was positive. Kathleen Goforth suggested that each working group consider impacts of the Inflation Reduction Act and bipartisan infrastructure law when they get started. Jason Mendelson had shared the working group on the role of citizens advisory committees. So in his absence, I reviewed updates to the CAC objective generated by our group. Our committee discussed and unanimously passed a recommendation to this board to update our 5 objectives to read like this. Number 1, advise on substantial public-facing program initiatives before they're presented to the board for approval as practical given staff and CAC capacity. 2, engage in outreach to the community and advocate for PCE's mission, goals, and programs. 3, advise on high-level legislative and regulatory direction of the organization. 4, provide a forum for community discussions on a variety of strategies to reduce carbon emissions in conjunction with staff and board. And 5, form working groups as recommended by CAC members to assist Peninsula Clean Energy staff and board with projects important to the organization. This completes my report. What questions do you have for me?
Questions? I don't see any questions in the room. Let me see if there's any questions from the public. Is there any public comment on this? I don't see any public comment, Cheryl.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you for your very thorough report. Okay, the next item on the agenda is approval of a resolution delegating authority of the CEO to execute energy storage service agreement for an energy storage project with Lockhart ESS.
So good evening, members of the board, members of the public. My name's Sarah Mata. I'm a member of the Power Resources team, and I'm very pleased to be presenting this item to you tonight for your consideration. Next slide, please. First, just a summary of the recommendation. Staff is recommending that the board approve the resolution that delegates authority to the CEO to execute this agreement with the energy storage project Lockhart Energy Storage Services LLC and any necessary ancillary documents. a power delivery term of 15 years, starting at commercial operation date on or about June 1st, 2024, in an amount not to exceed 142 million. And I'll be going into more detail on the following slides. Next slide, please. Thank you. So tonight I'll be talking about an overview of the project, how we expect this project would operate and fit into our portfolio. A quick touch on the CPUC's midterm reliability procurement mandate, which mandates that we procure projects just like this one. The fit within our strategic plan, and then finally bring up the recommendation again for your consideration. Next slide, please. Next one. So the Lockhart Energy Storage Project is being developed by Terragen. It's located in San Bernardino County, out in the Mojave Desert area near the city of Barstow. You can see the project vicinity map on the right there. It's a lithium-ion battery with a 4-hour duration. It's 45 megawatts of discharging capacity with a total storage capacity of 180 megawatt hours. This contract would be for a term of 15 years, starting on June 1st, 2024. And some background on the site. This site currently is home to the SEGS 8 and SEGS 9 solar thermal projects. Terragen is redeveloping the SEGS 8 project as solar photovoltaic. They are also adding a storage component to the site using existing interconnection and transmission facilities. And this project is not located in a disadvantaged community. I don't think there's really any community in this location. It's rather remote. Next slide, please. The contract would be for a 45 megawatt capacity at a fixed dollars per kilowatt month rate with no escalation in price over the contract term. There's also a small fixed price rate that is applied to each megawatt hour discharge, known as a variable operating rate. The contract term is for 15 years, as mentioned previously, and Peninsula Clean Energy will be contracting for all of the capacity attributes from the facility. So that includes the right to charge and discharge the storage capacity, the right to any resource adequacy that the project qualifies for, and any ancillary services that the project can provide to the grid. And Peninsula Clean Energy will be the scheduling coordinator for the project, which means we have more direct control over how the project operates. Next slide, please. In negotiating this agreement, we have ensured that the project will use a project labor agreement or similar agreement in the construction of this project, and that is terms in the PPA. Next slide, please. So we have reviewed this project for environmental impacts to the area. This slide is just a summary of the process that we use to review the environmental impacts of the project. So we have worked with environmental nonprofits to develop this system that we use to evaluate environmental impacts of our projects. The way we do it is we take the geospatial footprint of the project and we evaluate whether that project is located in restricted or high conflict areas. And we use maps that are developed by the federal, state, regional, and local agencies that identify designated conservation areas or areas of environmental concern. We also look at identified mapped important habitat and habitat linkages, especially for special status species. And this is the process we use to evaluate our projects. So on the next slide, we have the results for this project. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this project is not located in any of these protected areas based on our analysis of this database developed by the USGS of all the protected areas. And additionally, because the transmission and interconnection facilities already exist, there's no expected environmental impacts from construction because there won't be any construction activities for these facilities. And the project has obtained all of its required environmental permits. Next slide, please. All right, now I'm going to talk about the expected operations of this project. Next slide. So these are several graphs, might be a little hard to read, but each graph represents how the battery will operate in 1 month of the year. And we're showing 2025 months as an example. So the y-axis for each of these graphs shows the megawatt hours being charged or discharged to the battery. When the blue line is above the middle of the graph, the battery is discharging to the grid. And when the blue line goes below the middle of the graph, that represents that the battery is charging from the grid. And the horizontal axis is hours in a typical day for that month. So you can see a pretty similar pattern for each month. The battery is expected to discharge a little bit during the morning peak and then charge from the grid during the solar hours, and then discharge back to the grid when during the evening peak. So what this battery is doing is helping shift energy from the solar hours when there's lots of solar energy on the grid and move that energy to the evening peak and early morning hours where there's a need for more energy on the grid. Next slide, please. So this slide summarizes how the battery will fit into PCE's portfolio. This is, again, on the y-axis showing the megawatt hours in our portfolio, and the x-axis, the horizontal axis, is showing hours in a typical day of the year in 2025. The black line is our load forecast for 2025. The gray bars show our existing contracts that we currently have in our portfolio. And the orange bars show how the Lockhart storage contract will contribute to our portfolio. So you can see a similar pattern that we saw on the previous graphs. The project will charge during the middle of the day when solar energy is plentiful, and then discharge during the evening hours and the early morning hours when we have a real need for more energy in our portfolio. So you can see that this project helps contribute to our 24/7 goal by shifting energy from when we have a lot of it to when we need more of it. Next slide, please. These are similar graphics, but showing a breakdown by season. So you can see in the spring and summer, we have more extra energy in the middle of the day when the sun is shining. And in the fall and the winter, we still need more energy in the middle of the day. But you can see the battery is expected to operate pretty similarly throughout the year. Next slide, please. Okay, a quick note on our strategic plan. Next slide. So this project really helps us fulfill our 24/7 goal, which is our priority 1, design a power portfolio sourced by 100% carbon-free energy by 2025 that aligns supply and demand on a 24/7 basis. And when you get down into the specific line items of Power Resources implementation of that priority, this will help us implement our goal number 2, secure sufficient, low-cost, clean sources of electricity that achieve our priorities while ensuring reliability and meeting regulatory mandates. So on the regulatory mandates note, on the next slide, I want to review the CPUC's midterm reliability requirements. Next slide, please. And go to the next one if you don't mind. So MTR stands for midterm reliability. This is a required procurement that CPUC requires all of the load serving entities in California to do. It's a very complicated procurement requirement. This table is a summary of the different categories and the different years that we have to procure various resources. Highlighted in red, the 2024 new generic capacity. Peninsula Clean Energy must procure at least 113 megawatts of resources in this category, and the Lockhart storage project will contribute towards our needs in this category. So this is a very valuable project. It is difficult to find projects that qualify for the 2024 category. So that's why I'm very pleased to be presenting this to you tonight. This will be a really important project in our portfolio. Next slide, please. And I think I'm just going to show the recommendation again for your consideration. Next slide. This is just the same as the first slide we looked at. So thank you for your time. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? I'll just note that in the course of looking for this power and resource adequacy that would be available on the time frame of beginning the delivery in 2024, as Sarah said, is not only very hard to find, it's very expensive. And the producers know that load serving entities, particularly CCAs, are desperate to find this power in this time frame. As you get further out into 26, 27, 28, the power becomes much more available and less expensive because they know there's more that can be available in that time frame. So it was a big deal for staff to be able to find a contract that delivered in this time frame. It's not to say it's cheap. It's they negotiated it at the best rate they could get, but it's definitely more expensive than power would be for delivery in 2027. I don't see any questions from the board. Are there any questions or public comment from the public? Yeah.
Tomorrow, I'm a business representative with IBW in San Mateo County, Local 617. I spoke with the attorney's office who was handling this project for the CURE organization. And I spoke with her on, I believe it was Tuesday, and she said this project is going full force and they expect project labor agreement has been sent to Terrigen and she fully expects it to be signed by Monday or Tuesday of next week. So I encourage you. Said these projects are hard to come by, and this project is being done with a full project labor agreement for labor. And that's probably why the reason they can deliver this project to you in 2024. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Is there any other public comments? I don't see any public comment in the room. Is there any online? No. Okay. Can I get a motion to approve? Okay, thank you, Rod.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Sam. No problem, take your time.
So it's the whole new world in person. Who made the motion? Who seconded?
Rod,
Thank you.
Sam second, Sam Hindi seconded it.
Thank you. Okay, San Mateo County,
Yes.
San Mateo County. Atherton,
Yes.
Belmont. Yes. Brisbane.
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Colma,
Yes.
Daly City,
Yes.
East Palo Alto,
Yes.
Foster City,
Yes.
Half Moon Bay,
Yes.
Hillsborough,
Yes.
Los Banos, Menlo Park,
Yes.
Millbrae,
Aye.
Pacifica,
Yes.
Portola Valley,
Yes.
Redwood City,
Yes.
San Bruno,
Yes.
San Carlos,
Yes.
San Mateo,
Yes.
South San Francisco,
Yes.
and Woodside. Thank you. Motion passes.
Okay, thank you, Nellie. Next item on the agenda is to adopt a resolution approving a plan to delay compliance with upholding time varying rates to the market informed demand automation server.
So I'm here to take any questions on this item. If folks have any questions on this item, we actually intended to include this in consent. And then it got a little jumbled on the agenda. So if you have questions about the materials that were included in the agenda packet, happy to do that. Otherwise, we'd like to just request a vote by the board for this item.
Well, can you just define the Midas database?
Yeah, okay. So it is the Midas, it is an initiative by the CEC. It's intended to create a sort of a centralized repository of time differentiated rates for all load serving entities to upload to. that third-party aggregators and other folks are meant to be able to access to download time varying rates intended to really help the CEC's goal on load modification. It's part of the LMS proceedings, load modification standards for long-term automated load modification signaling to devices for consumers. It's a pretty high level, high concept, very much in its sort of infancy stage of development right now. And the reason we're asking for delay on the compliance piece of this is because the CEC is very behind in actually finalizing their protocols on this. And the original sort of compliance deadline of July 1 is under significant debate amongst all utilities in the state of California. We just filed a joint letter with the IOUs and all of the CECs CCAs that are required to comply with this, requesting the commissioner in charge of this proceeding to delay the compliance deadline of July 1 and offering a series of mitigated steps in between to help the CEC meet their goals, but also being realistic about what is accomplishable considering the database, the platform, or the documentation for utilities to comply. All in a very it's in the documentation that was in the memo.
And this resolution basically supports the staff position that was communicated.
Yeah, it's a little bit in terms of, this is really sort of insurance policy recommended by Cal CCA for CCAs to get their boards to pass a resolution around this. They're actually in the regulation isn't a really clear path for CCAs to request delay in the compliance deadline, but because we're partnering with the IRUs in the joint letter, Cal CCA suggested that all the impacted CCAs have their boards pass a resolution supporting essentially that request.
Okay, yes.
I just have one question. I assume there's no penalty then for non-compliance since it's, modeled up for everybody?
There is not a defined penalty, no. There could be a adjudication, if the CEC wanted to try to take us to court over it, that would be their path of penalty. I think we're all very confident they would have a really hard time proving their case since they have not finalized the requirements to comply.
Jeff?
So just to summarize, I mean, we actually can't comply.
We can't comply, we reasonably can't comply,
So we're
yeah,
asking time to
Yeah.
wait until we actually can physically.
Right,
comply with this.
yeah.
And this resolution basically supports the staff position that's already been communicated.
Yes, yeah.
Any other questions? Is there any public comment on this? Okay, I don't see any public comment.
Yes, I have one comment. This is Pradeep.
Okay, Pradeep?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that time varying rates, which this item pertains to, is a very big change in terms of rates that we establish for PCE. It brings a whole new set of parameters and estimation, etc. So I would strongly recommend that staff prepare a report to inform everybody on the board regarding what this new time varying rates are going to be like.
So just to answer, clarify a little bit, this particular requirement is related to our existing time varying rates. So this would be like our time of use rates that we already have those are considered time varying rates because the cost of electricity varies by the time of day that you use it. There is a different forthcoming later item for locational marginal pricing, which is part of the whole LMS proceeding. But that is later, and those are very different rates, but those are a good year plus away from us needing to bring forward to the board.
Thank you.
See any other comments? This is an action item. Can I get a motion to approve?
So.
Yeah.
Second.
Second, thank you, John.
San Mateo County,
Yes.
San Mateo County, Atherton,
Yes.
Belmont,
Yes.
Brisbane,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Colma,
Yes.
Palo Alto,
Yes.
Foster City,
Yes.
Half Moon Bay,
Yes.
Hillsborough,
Yes.
Los Banos, Menlo Park,
Yes.
Millbrae,
Aye.
Pacifica,
Yes.
Portola Valley,
Yes.
Redwood City,
Yes.
San Bruno,
Yes.
San Carlos,
Yes.
San Mateo,
Yes.
South San Francisco,
Yes.
and Woodside. And motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the next item on the agenda is approval of diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion matters related to amendments to 3 items, the strategic plan, PC's policy 9 and PC's policy 10.
Dana will be.
I assume Shayna's introduced.
Hello. Great. We can move to the next slide. Can everyone remotely hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, great. So as our agenda for today, we'll start off with our backgrounds and regarding the DEAI scope of work. We'll then move into proposed edits to our strategic plan, proposed edits to policy number 9, proposed edits to policy number 10, and then also touch on the executive committee recommendation with regard to these policies that occurred at their April 10th meeting earlier this month. So we can move to the next slide. So there was five key tasks to the DEAI scope of work that started in mid-2021. The first was reviewing relevant DEAI legislation and regulatory requirements, primarily Proposition 209 and our supplier diversity requirements, and that has been completed. The second was to conduct a DEAI organizational needs assessment that included surveys in spring of 2022, followed up by interviews of key stakeholder groups in spring of 2022. We then had our consultant work with us to create an organizational DEAI policy, which is policy 22. That was approved by the board at the October 27th meeting in 2022. Then we also had our consultant work with us on updating relevant organizational policies. That includes 3 of the policies that I'm bringing to you tonight, the strategic plan and policies 9 and 10. Employee handbook edits are also are in progress and will be presented to the board at a later date. And then the 5th item is the DEAI action plan, which are department goals and metrics to operationalize DEAI, which is also still in progress. We can move to the next slide. So jumping right into our proposed edits to our strategic plan. We have 6 pillars to our strategic plan: organizational excellence, financial stewardship, marketing, outreach, and account services, community energy program, public policy, and power resources. Our consultant suggested proposing edits to the organizational excellence pillar of the strategic plan. And those edits are highlighted in red on this page. So adding the full acronym of diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion to that pillar. We anticipate making more updates to the strategic plan at the key tactic level during implementation of our DEAI action plan. Those updates are at a staff level and do not require board approval, but this larger overarching goal update is what we're making. All right, moving on to the next slide, proposed edits to policy number 9. This policy was originally approved in late 2016. The current title is Ethical Vendor Standards, and the proposed new title is Ethical Procurement Standards. The focus of the policy has broadened to include staff's procurement conduct, and we borrowed from San Mateo County's Code of Ethical Conduct Procurement Ethics when drafting this policy. We move to the next slide. So previously, this was a 2-sentence policy on vendor standards. The proposed revised policy has the addition of the following sections, and the full red line is included in your packet tonight. These include sustainability and social responsibility, transparency, confidentiality, impartiality, professionalism, compliance, and accountability. Now we can move on to policy number 10 on the next slide. So policy number 10 was originally approved in late 2016 and updated in late 2018. And I'll just jump into the proposed edits that we have in your packet tonight. We updated formatting, added numbered section headers for easier policy navigation. We reformatted the policy statement under section 1, primarily restructuring language that was already included in the original policy, and also includes the revised organizational excellence pillar that I spoke to on the few slides earlier. And also reference to the recently approved policy 22, diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion. We revised several parts of section 2B supply chain. We revised item 4 in section 2B to request information from suppliers and contractors of their status as a minority woman, LGBT, disabled veteran, or persons with disabilities owned business, rather than collecting information on inclusivity of their workforce, which is now addressed in item 6 of this section. We revised item 6 to encourage, not require, reporting from developers and large vendors on the inclusivity in their business staff. And we removed a reference from business ownership from this item, and that is now addressed in item 4. So primarily those changes were to reduce redundancy and provide greater clarity and reflect our current practices. We don't currently require diversity reporting from all of our suppliers. So those were the primary edits that we made to that section. We then added item 7, supply chain code of conduct, to the section 2B supply chain, which I will get into on the next slide. So we can move forward. So these standards is a new attachment to the policy, the supply chain code of conduct, in reference in section 2B supply chain. The standards were derived from the United Nations Guiding Principles of Business and Human Rights, the core conventions of the International Labor Organization, and other solar and business social responsibility organizations. And I'll just provide a brief summary of each of the sections of the supply chain code of conduct, but the full version is included in your packet with more detail. So for freely chosen employment, forced, bonded, or indentured labor, including involuntary or exploitative prison labor, slavery, or trafficking of persons, is not permitted in our supply chain. Young workers, child labor is not permitted in any stage of manufacturing. Working hours, there will be set maximum working hours per week and time off every week for workers. Wages and benefits, the compensation paid to workers shall comply with all applicable wage laws, and there shall be overtime compensation for overtime hours worked. Humane treatment, there shall be no harsh or inhumane treatment, including violence, abuse, punishment, coercion, bullying, or public shaming. Non-discrimination and non-harassment, our suppliers will be committed to a workplace free of harassment and unlawful discrimination. Freedom of association, our suppliers shall respect the rights of all workers to form and join trade unions of their own choosing. In restricted jurisdiction, our suppliers shall not manufacture or produce products in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region of China, assumed to products manufactured in that region have been manufactured using forced labor. So we will not allow that in our supply chain. We can move on to the next slide. Moving back to the main section of the policy, proposed edits to policy number 10 continued. So we added the city of Los Banos, Merced County, and Central Valley in section 2C, inclusive business practices, and when defining local in section 3B, sustainable workforce objectives. Since we have expanded service there, and that is part of our service territory now, we would like to consider that part of local procurement and we procure from those areas. We originally modified the shall use language in section 3D to shall use best efforts to use union labor, local workforce, and apprenticeship programs. This was later modified by the executive committee to shall prioritize and give preference to at their April 10th meeting. And I'll go more in detail on that later in my presentation, and also welcome executive committee members who were at that meeting to describe that conversation as well. And then we modified the apprenticeship requirements in section 3D as well. We can move to the next slide. remove the entire section and paragraph on PCE feed-in tariff price projects. And we renamed section 3E to Peninsula Clean Energy Programs from Peninsula Clean Energy Efficiency Project, and updated the rest of this section to reference energy programs. And moving to the next slide, as an aside, in the proposed revised policy, you reference IRA apprenticeship requirements. These are described in the IRS notice 2022-61, and there's 3 different kinds of apprenticeship requirements depending on the project size. And we just included in the policy a reference to this notice directly, and also any future guidance issued by the IRS on the apprenticeship requirements for solar projects in order to receive the full tax benefit for those types of projects. Move to the next slide. So we originally brought this package to the executive committee in January. At that meeting, we heard public comment from our labor representatives in San Mateo County, and we were directed by the executive committee to meet with labor to discuss the proposed edits to section 3D of policy 10. Initially, there were two focuses of that meeting, which is the modification from shall use union labor to shall use best efforts to use union labor in the original edits that we proposed. And then we also had an earlier understanding of the IRA's apprenticeship requirements that we have since remedied by referencing the requirements directly and removed the previous suggestion that we had with regard to those requirements. And so we opted to keep in the shall use best efforts language to present to the executive committee for their guidance and consideration after that meeting. And we brought this back to the executive committee, but it was not heard in their February meeting. And so we met again with our labor representatives for the county in March, and they reiterated their concern with the proposed revision to shall use best efforts. And we can move to the next slide. So there was a robust discussion at the executive committee meeting on April 10th on staff's original proposal of shall use best efforts in section 3D. I won't comment on the details of that unless I'm asked further, but the executive committee members can also, I'll leave it to them to describe the discussion, but there's some detail within your packet as to what that discussion was. And committee members ultimately decided to modify the language from shall use best efforts to use union labor to shall prioritize and give preference to using union labor. So a slightly stronger modification. We can move to the next slide. So at the executive committee meeting on April 10th and at the former earlier board meeting in March, we heard public comment from the Workforce and Environmental Justice Standards Alliance for CCA. And we received public comment at the executive committee on April 10th with regard to the policy 10 edits, and then also our broader DEI policies and workforce practices. And we received direction from the executive committee at the April 10th meeting to move forward with the proposed revisions as amended by the executive committee, but then also meet with the Workforce and EJ Alliance, moving to hear their concerns. And so staff had an initial meeting with the Workforce and EJ Alliance on April 20th, and it was a constructive meeting. And the Alliance had a positive reaction to the executive committee's modification of language from shall use best efforts to shall prioritize and give preference to. And staff is open to meeting with the Alliance again to work through their comparison documents. They compared several of our policies with some standards that they have gathered from other. We're open to meeting with the Alliance again to flesh out that comparison document further. And then I will bring it to our recommendation on the next slide, which is approval of the DEI related amendments to the strategic plan in policy 9 and 10. I'm open to discussion and questions from board members and the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Question from members of the board. Tiger Judge.
Thank you very much. And I see our friends in labor are more robust in the audience than they have been in the past. Fondly, I think of the many times that our former board compatriot Rick Benia has been with us to ensure protection of labor, and the comments of David Mora at the last meeting were well taken by me. So as I was reading this, these were the questions that occurred to me, and it may well be that you already answered some of them in your presentation, but I wanted to make absolutely sure that I was hearing you correctly. So regarding policy number 10, what is the mechanism, and I have 3 questions to start with. What is the mechanism by which we as a board can verify if best efforts were made? Do we know what best efforts are or look like? And will we be consulting with labor representatives to make sure that we're exhausting our ability to give preference or priority to union labor?
That's a really good question. And I might bring in Raphael here, who has some experience implementing this in programs. So that was part of the discussion of the executive committee as to like what does values best efforts mean and what does shall prioritize and give preference to. And so in my staff report, our staff report, we mentioned moving forward with an RFP with a preferential inclination to using union labor in the evaluation process. And then if we don't receive sufficient bids from union labor, to then have flexibility to use a non-union firm. Is that going into your question, or do you want more detail?
It's a good start, but I'm a detailed guy, so the more you got, the more happy I will be.
Maybe Raphael can speak to what we've done in the past.
Thank you.
There are several things. First of all, since the inception of programs, we've always made a priority working with our union partner. I see Scott and Dave Morrow here. Thanks for joining us. I'm pleased to say, for example, our solar and storage on the government buildings program, which is the 12 sites across the service territory for 1.7 megawatts. We did an RFP. We selected a local union contractor, Intermountain Electric. We're thrilled to have them on board. They come with phenomenal references, and we're really excited to be working with them. And we're looking forward to, in the next round, which is much larger, over 40 sites, probably 14 megawatts or so, to hopefully also identify a strong local union contractor for that round of installation as well. And so in general, in our RFPs, we do state preference for unions. It manifests primarily in asking for respondents on how they will comply with our sustainable workforce policy, which has a number of elements, not only union, but local, and also other dimensions to it as well. So we look for that as part of the responses.
So are you saying there will be a clear standardization in the RFP process?
Well, we always have a clear set of scoring associated with proposals to come in. I would say that exactly how we select vendors in different programs varies. So in the solar and storage program, we're selecting an installer. However, we have other programs where that's not exactly the case. So for example, in our EV charging program, we did initially have in our requirements requirement to use union electricians for installing EV charging. We were enormously appreciative of working with IBEW on helping us identify contractors who would be on our list of contractors that customers could use. But we didn't kind of encounter challenges. And one of the things of that program was that smaller projects tend to be less effective. And we did have trouble getting bids. We worked very closely with IBEW to look for ways to address to get more bids, basically more participation on the part of contractors. This was a multi-month process over the course of last year. And it was not as successful as we really needed to move the program forward. We, as a consequence, then, in consultation with members of the board, did create more flexibility for customers to choose contractors that they wanted to work with. And we did see a fivefold increase in the participation in the program subsequent to that. So there are scenarios where that flexibility becomes quite important in terms of meeting the program objectives. And that's reasons why the specific policies forward to you are the way they are. So it's still absolutely our preference. We want to work with our union partners and make that successful in every case possible.
So I think what I hear you saying is the approach you have traditionally taken will remain vis-a-vis this change of verbiage. But in the cases in which it no longer becomes feasible, find labor for apparently smaller projects, then if we must choose somebody else, it allows us a sort of flexibility whereby we don't feel like we're utterly letting ourselves down in the process. Is that approximately?
Yes, that's true. And we have the other dimension here, and this is all happening under the PEI effort. This is anecdotal because there's not a lot of good data, frankly. Some information coming our way that, some contractors historically have not felt that comfortable in working within the unions. There's some historic reasons for that, many of them, but, may no longer be apparent. And I know that IBW has had a lot of success now, bringing in a lot of diversity into their program and so forth. But there's, from the standpoint of maximizing diversity, there's a little bit of tension there between those goals, or at least a perceived tension among some members.
I appreciate the clarity, and I know I'll certainly be listening with a keen ear should some of our labor representatives decide to speak on this issue to make sure that we're all more or less on the same page, which will determine how I cast my vote personally. I have two more questions. I think they're shorter ones. One on page 88 toward the bottom about the intent of the language. The question was, the staff, so if we should pass with this language, will staff have clear guidance from this board then that essentially we're agreeing that union waivers to be used at every conceivable possibility? Again, I'm just aiming for clarity and trying to keep it.
That's certainly our intention.
And then I have one more question, which I think is kind of a technical thing on page 100. Under, I think it gets back to the IRA language, and there was one bit about output with maximum net output of at least 1 megawatt. Clean energy, construction contractor, subcontractors, shop priorities, preference to, et cetera. That 1 megawatt language is specifically IRA language.
That's correct.
Very good. Thank you very much. And thank everyone for your time.
I actually have a follow-up question. When we're talking about structuring some of the programs and making them more scalable, and also providing the sort of the end customer more flexibility in terms of their implementation and selection process. I know that there's sort of this trade-off of, I recognize the trade-off of wanting to have flexibility, but also to structure the program in a way that can consolidate or bundle job opportunities that would make it favorable for labor to be competitive. So I'm just wondering how you're thinking about that in terms of the rollout, because it would be a shame to put in this language and then not fundamentally change how how we're structuring small jobs, for example, that basically exclude labor from even being competitive in those markets.
Yeah, and that's a fair question. So it is something that we've explored, again, on the solar for public buildings program, where we have a very high degree of control over the timing of projects. We see a lot of opportunity there for bundling. We have actively explored that in the context of both the EV charging and our residential program. And it's actually, we have found it extremely difficult. For a variety of reasons, but primarily because it's really the customer deciding how and when they want to move forward on projects. And the configuration of the projects varies a lot, especially the smaller you go, the more varied it gets. And in the case of residential, it becomes extremely difficult, particularly working with underserved communities where there are often many challenges in the home. and coordinating in such a way that there are as few touch points as possible on the schedule that the customer is able to accommodate becomes extremely challenging to do that across many sites.
Yeah, I can add to the question about how do you verify? Because this is a big deal. And I think the right way to think about it is break the contracts into 3 categories. One category are the contracts which are PPAs, where we're negotiating with a developer who's a contracting party, but we're in direct negotiations with that developer. And in every one of those cases, we are requiring a PLA. And it gets presented, and those, almost all of them get presented to the board because they're all of quite substantial size. And every time that staff presents to you one of these contracts, like the Lockhart agreement tonight, they always say, if there's a PLA, and I think I am only aware of one where there wasn't because of an anomaly, and what the environmental consequences and investigation have been. Both of those happen in those big PPAs which come to the board. The second category of contracts is where we're a contracting party. They're not all coming to the board, except there's maybe a large type of agreement that comes to the board that we use. And that's the kind of agreement that we entered into with all of the cities. And for the second cohort, there's some school districts and there's other public agencies. In those, we have some influence to try to aggregate the deals together so they can be more substantial. And in every case, particularly the apprenticeship issue is a really big issue in those because it gives an opportunity for people to train other people, and the unions are the best, no question. They're the ones who are driving, not just driving that because it's in their interest, but they're driving it because they have the connections to the people that are coming into the apprenticeship programs. So to partner with them on that is the best way to make that happen, and we know it. And we're doing that in absolutely every case. Where the third category are the smaller contracts that end up being small businesses and residential. They're not aggregatable. So in fact, the best I think we can do in those situations is we can ask for referrals from the unions, and we can encourage apprenticeship for those because there are people that are engaged in that work that should learn it at the level that the unions are teaching people how to do it, because that's really the professional level. But they're small contracts and it's very hard to aggregate. We went down this path and we weren't getting contractors to fulfill some of those demands. So we weren't seeing the electrification happening that that was one of our goals to try to make happen. And that's forced us into an assessment of what can we do here without breaching our principles. And that's only a piece of it. That's the union piece, because there's the whole DEAI piece that's been presented, which is real. But the union piece is something we had a lot of conversation about at the executive committee. And I'll just add, there was legitimate concern expressed by labor about the language of shall use best efforts, because shall use best efforts is language that you see all over the place, and it's hard to interpret what it means. And I think that it was a good move to change that language from shall use best efforts to shall prioritize and give preference to. But in reality, shall prioritize and give preference to is really using best efforts, right? I mean, that's really what it is. It's just defining what it is rather than going with this language that's sort of more general and can be interpreted as more wishy-washy, which wasn't the intent. So I think that change was a good change.
Thank you very much.
And can I just add on to that? Everything you said was totally spot on. The only thing I'd add is that we did mention at that EP meeting too, that the board will continue to change. So changing that language also hopefully means that so the future boards understand where we were coming from, what the intent was.
Can I ask a follow-up question? When the RFPs are issued, the scoring criteria, are those included in the RFP so that anyone responding knows how you're going to evaluate?
Yes, we will be adapting based on past practices, we will be adapting our practices based on the new policy. So we do anticipate making some modifications to how scoring.
Just reflecting on the wording, to me, the scoring carries more weight than the wording, because it tells you who's gonna get the contract. And it doesn't discourage a small business, if that's all that's available, they'll apply. It doesn't discourage the preference for unions. It just makes it very clear. Thank you.
Any other questions from members of the board?
I have one question. In regards to the supply chain and code of conduct, so does this apply to the suppliers, like vendors as well, that they get components from, say batteries, internal components as well?
The primary intent of this is for RPPs or large scale, like RFOs for renewable development. So to comply with all parts of, essentially what they're manufacturing, as part of like the solar pole, like PV systems and whatnot. So does that answer your question?
So the battery internal component, where they provided, are we assuring that they're not coming from, I know we said China on part of it, but does it cover the areas where, the minerals are coming from, or the battery production?
But I can't speak to the mineral mining specifically.
Yeah, I mean.
But, yeah, maybe.
When the designation or kind of defining that one area of China, we know that that is an area that uses forced labor and things like that, so we definitely don't want anything from there. As far as what the components are that go into the batteries, we can ask the suppliers where they come from, but it's hard to follow the whole supply chain. I think there's with the IRA and the infrastructure bill, there's an effort to have that be sourced here in the US, and eventually that transition will happen, but right now it's pretty much.
But we inquire.
Yeah, we ask.
Yeah.
They don't always know, actually. And it's, there's a lot of supply chain constraints right now. And when we contracted for battery projects, they may tell us that they had one supplier and that supplier couldn't do it, so they've had to switch to another supplier. So there's a lot of turmoil still going on.
My other comment was, should we have public comment first before our comment?
Yes, that's why I just took questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next question. So there'll be, all of this is subject to an ongoing dialogue between staff, labor and executive committee, and if there's an issue, it'll be brought back to us.
We can count on that.
Okay.
We can definitely, our policy 10 is the most progressive in the Los serving community, which is why we're having this level of discussion.
Yeah.
But yes, I think that from the very beginning, we built close ties with labor as a critical partner in this entire effort. And it hasn't always been easy, because the relationship between certain locals, labor locals, and the IOUs, particularly PG&E, was very tight. And here we come, we're a new entity. Right. So, we've had to prove ourselves, which is appropriate, I think. And I think we have proved ourselves, and we will continue to hear from labor. We're quite involved with them, and they pay attention.
But the mechanism will be the executive committee will continue to monitor that interaction, and that there's any issue.
The interaction will principally be managed at the staff level, because it's at the contract level where labor really wants to make sure that the policies are being done properly, and the issue of verification is judged at the staff level with the contracts. So, that's where it starts. We hear about it at the executive committee, and we encourage labor to be in touch with us both individually and formally at the executive committee. Okay. And public comment here.
Great.
And also contracts would, if they're over $100,000, they'll come to you for approval.
Okay, yes.
Definitely appreciate the dialogue here and making sure that we adhere to a high labor standard. I see we might have, arrived kind of a compromise with the language prioritize, give preference to for the PCE owned generation projects, but how come this language wasn't adopted for the energy program section?
So we've always had best efforts language in the program section, and so staff hasn't proposed changes, but if the board would like to direct staff to do that, we can make that change.
I think to be consistent, maybe we could make that change for the program section.
I'll leave it to like the vote and how it gets,
Right.
yeah, depending on the motion, I'll defer to you.
You want to take public comment and then have another discussion on
Yeah, I'm gonna open up to the board to give comments. I'm just looking for questions. Okay, let's take public comment. We have 2 public comments online, and I'm sure we have some in the room. Dave, why don't you go ahead?
Chairman DeGolia, Executive Committee. Board Directors, thank you for letting us speak tonight. We, the Workforce Environmental Justice Coalition, are in favor of this new proposed language of shall prioritize, give preference to, provided this new language is quantified. We would like to work in conjunction with PC staff to devise a plan that works for everyone while adding this new language to PCE projects and programs. We believe with our support and collaboration, we can help increase PCE's decarbonization goals and not decrease those goals. We have around 300 signatory contractors that perform work in San Mateo County, with an increasing amount of them getting on board with the new green energy economy, especially since the rollout of the IRA initiative. Labor is more than willing to bring in the smaller diversified business owners and pair them up with our skilled and trained diversified workforce. We can also bring into our training program their employees who would like to upgrade their skills and knowledge. At this time, I'd like to share with the board our present day demographics in our local union. Our active membership is only 52% Caucasians. 48% are non-Caucasian. That's the whole membership. Our apprenticeship, which has 209 students, is 37% Caucasian, 63% non-Caucasians. In June, we will graduate 53 students in our 2020 graduating class. 32% are Caucasians, 68% are non-Caucasians. Our new first year class starting in August with 60 students is 33% Caucasians and 67% non-Caucasians. You can see we are training to an even more diversified workforce in the future. I also like to clarify some of what Raphael was talking about. We did work collaboratively with PC about these programs, but when we really got down to the nuts and bolts of it, we pointed out the program design issues for our contractors. There was insufficient information. The engineering was left up to the contractors. It wasn't being done. It weren't complete. We had to go out and do more site evaluations, do load calculations. The permitting issue was a nightmare for our contractors. And there was just too much for them to be done. So we would like to work with PCE and get something together that will make it attractive for more and more contractors to get into this arena. It will force them to lower their costs. Not to mention these other contractors, how do we know they're paying the prevailing wage? The reason why most contractors are below what the unions pay is because they're not paying pension, they're not paying health and welfare, and they're not paying for training. So there's your difference. We would like to get together with the board, with the staff, and work out something that we can all live with. Thank you so much for letting me speak this evening. I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kifa Kilo. I am a journeyman wireman with Local 617. I actually turned out last year from the 5-year apprenticeship, and I just kind of wanted to take this opportunity to share what the apprenticeship is like and the beneficial aspects of it. So first and foremost, I'll start off by telling you that when I started, I never touched tools in my life. I didn't even know the names of my tools that I had in my work bag. And additionally, I had certain misconceptions of what construction workers were like. And, you know, I was full of these wrong stereotypes. And that was actually I was, sorry, it's actually the complete opposite. So I'll tell you about my concerns. First and foremost, I'm a woman. I'm also a Palestinian American Muslim woman. And so with that being said, I was concerned people would have certain prejudices or I wouldn't be socially accepted amongst my peers. But with that being said, I have been actually the most well-received and well-celebrated individual within my union, my local union, as well as nationally. So every year of my 5-year apprenticeship, I was recognized for my efforts and my contribution. In 2019, I actually won National Apprentice of the Year out of the entire US, Canada, and Guam. And that is reflective of the commitment to fostering excellence in their apprentices. So not only does this apprenticeship train you to be an electrician, it also teaches you to be an upstanding citizen. And I feel that that's extremely important because in the US, as well as in a lot of our jobs, a lot of US jobs, right? A lot of it is promoting individualism. So it's all about you and it's only about you. And when you're a part of the apprenticeship, it's not just about you, it's about your union, your community that you live and you work in. Additionally, education is the differentiating factor between being led and being a leader. And that's what it's created for me. I started off pursuing an undergraduate degree in chemistry. And I actually changed my degree from chemistry to labor and employment studies from San Francisco State University. San Francisco State University is one of the only universities that actually has a labor and employment studies. This is extremely relevant because it is directly applicable to the union aspect of, the administrative, portion, how unions run, but it's also about all workers. And everyone is a worker essentially. And, Broderick was actually one of my professors. I went to Skyline and he had a wonderful class. I enjoyed it. I don't know if you remember.
I remember you.
Yeah. But nonetheless, I also received scholarships that paid for my undergraduate degree. And while I was an apprentice, I actually am currently working on a graduate degree in labor and employment studies that my local is actually funding. So not only did I acquire skill with my, my hands and my tools, but I also have become a very well-educated individual. The apprenticeship creates success, and I'm going to tell you why. It's the system. Oh, so sorry. Quickly. Okay, you got it. But last thing I was going to say, it's you go to work, you have a coach, and the material that you're learning 2 nights a week that is directly applicable to the field. So it sets you up to win. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
It's KEEFAH. Oh.
Thank you so much for your story. I appreciate it. Chair, members of the board, my name is Benjamin Eichert. I am the director of Ledge Green, California, and the director of climate programs for the Romero Institute. We are, I believe, founding members of the Workforce and Environmental Justice Standards Alliance. And the Romero Institute is a nonprofit that, stretching all the way back to 2016, has dedicated, has made it a priority to help grow and strengthen the community choice energy movement. So first off, I really want to thank this board, this agency, and staff for engaging collaboratively and productively, constructively with the Alliance to work through these issues. What you're going to be voting on is incredibly important. I think as the chair mentioned, you have chosen to work on standards that set the bar. Other agencies throughout the state are going to look to what you're doing here as an example as they start to work through these issues as well. But also zooming out, there was a really interesting headline a couple of weeks ago that this country is trying to electrify and there are not enough electricians. And so building and growing a robust, skilled, and diverse and trained workforce is incredibly important, not only to what we're doing here locally, but also in the state and also in the country. I want to just take a quick second. I really appreciate the opportunity working in this alliance to build bridges with labor and with our brothers and sisters in the environmental justice movement. It's not often that these organizations and communities have a chance to work together towards a shared purpose. I want to just draw your attention, though, quickly to the fact that we really appreciate the movement and the upgrades in the language in the labor sections of policy 10, but there are still some areas where policy 9 falls short. someone on our team, Batul, who I think you'll hopefully hear from a little bit later, did a great side-by-side comparison. So I would like to ask you not only to adopt the shall prioritize and give preference to language, but also upgrade it in the programs section, the PCD programs section. And then additionally, give direction to staff to continue to work with our alliance to look at policy 9, make similar types of upgrades. So what we're asking is that you not adopt policy 9 today, that you just simply postpone it for a bit. Give direction to staff to continue working on that part of the policy, so we can hopefully come back here again next time you meet and adopt that policy as well. It will also set the great bar. Thank you so much.
Is there any other public comment in the room? Okay, we have a lot of people for giving public comment. Please keep it to under 2 minutes.
Is it time?
If it's 10, well, there's a timer right up there on the.
Okay. Hi, my name is Elsa Gernand, and I grew up in Redwood City, and I'm a 4th year apprentice with IBW 617. And when I was a kid, I was concerned because it seemed like the only way for me to continue living in my community was to go to college, get a career in like tech, or go to a startup that made it big. Because I was looking at the homes around me and I was thinking, there's no way otherwise. And I tried college, but that didn't work out for me. And when I returned home, I was unsure of my future and I was kind of in a dark place. I didn't know how I could stay here. And the union gave me an opportunity I didn't see anywhere else. I never saw myself in construction, and frankly, I never would have got into this industry without the union and the people in it and the care they gave. First, through the Trades Introduction Program, which for San Mateo County was run by our then president, Dan Piscini. And it gave me the information and courage to apply to the different local unions. And then through the pre-apprenticeship program with Local 617, which in part, they reach out to apprentices from underrepresented communities or, people, so like I'm a woman, and they reach out to you and they let you try the work for a year and also learn some of the stuff you'll be learning in the program and coach you on how to like get through the interview process and everything that people who already have members in the IBW might already know. So that helped a lot. And the union gave me this opportunity. And as an apprentice, there are classes, but a lot of your learning is on the job. Not only am I going to leave with no student loans, but you're provided a job and paid throughout with medical, dental, vision, and retirement. And when I'm finished, I'll have a career that will support me and living here in my community and working in my community. I've already worked on the Veterans Solar Project for Redwood City parking. And as we embark on this long, expansive plan to bring local network solar energy to the peninsula, I thank you for continuing to commit with us, for investing in local union labor so that we can invest in and build our community together. Thank you.
Chairman, board, thank you. My name is Scott Wine, business manager, IBW Local 617. I'm a 3rd generation inside wireman. I just want to thank the executive committee for taking up this challenge and choosing better language. I also implore that we continue to work together to quantify this language. We sponsor apprenticeship readiness programs, and I just want to discuss the going with low road contractors in the sake of getting things done is not a way to speed up progress. Every member that we turn out from our apprenticeship program is electric vehicle infrastructure trained. I'm not sure if you guys have it in your policy yet that the people that are doing this work have that qualification, but I would like to see that happen in the future as well. And you're not going to find a more diverse workforce than the IBW. Please continue to support high road jobs and careers that we will continue to support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, board. My name is Bart Pantoja. I'm the business manager, San Mateo County Building and Construction Trades Council, representing over 10,000 men and women working in construction in San Mateo County. So we'll keep it short and sweet. The building trades is in favor of the executive committee's modified language. Thank you. And please follow up with the operationalization. This is really accepted, maybe hard word, of this language. And the PCE is at the forefront of the DEAI. We got a lot of acronyms going here. And we look forward to future discussions with the Alliance workforce and E&J and staff. So thank you.
Thank you, Bart. Is there any other public comment in the room?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everybody. I'm Rick Bonilla. Most people here know me. I'm the former mayor of the city of San Mateo, former member of this board and the executive committee. Many people don't know that how committed I am to what goes on here, how it happens, and that is. In 2014, I took steps to visit as a planning commissioner in the city of San Mateo, a board meeting of Marin Clean Energy in San Rafael in the evening on a weeknight, so that I could ask them if they would come with me here to San Mateo County, talk with our board of supervisors, and help get this entity started. And so here we are now. That was 2014. In 2016, the unanimous vote to start PCE. Every single city council member from all 20 cities in San Mateo and the 5 members of the board of supervisors all voted unanimously to start this organization. So I'm standing here today, a lifelong union member, joined the Carpenters Union in 1977. And that's why when I saw that there was proposed changes to the labor language that had been negotiated at the beginning of PCE with the Building Trades Council over what has turned out to be a lot of labor, it was quite appropriate. But I didn't think that these changes could be made without inviting labor in to talk, which is why labor, and then eventually the Workforce and Environmental Justice Alliance got involved also. I'm here today to say that I think that we have reached a good conclusion to the negotiations, the talks that have gone on in talking about the best way to go forward. And I got a couple of things. I want to say though that I recognize the comments that were made by James Bowman about maybe trying to make it a little better. And I also support the comments that were made by Mr. Eicher over here about making sure we're very clear about a few of the next steps that are laid out. So I want to read just a couple of things here. Number one, we should adopt the proposed shall prioritize and give preference to language in the sustainable workforce policy to condition on staff and stakeholders meeting to negotiate how that language will be operationalized. Number two, upgrade the weaker shall use best effort language in the PCE program section of policy 10 to match the recommended shall prioritize and give preference to language for PCE owned generation. Number three, direct staff to work cooperatively with labor, environmental justice, and climate stakeholders to innovate new program designs that empower organized workers and contractors and facilitate local energy resistance, as well as scale up electrification in buildings and vehicles. Delay, number four, delay the adoption of policy 9 until staff returns to the board with revised DEAI policy language that specifically addresses the gaps identified by the Alliance. So those are my recommendations. I know there'll be a motion here tonight. I hope it's inclusive of these things. And thank you very much for your time.
Is there any other public comment in this room? Okay, let's take public comment online, and please keep your comments to under 2 minutes. I can't read any of the names.
Batul Al-Saadi.
Good evening, and thank you all for your time tonight. My name is Batul Al-Saadi, and I am the environmental justice organizer at Let's Green California, and I serve as one of the EJ representatives in our statewide CCA Workforce and EJ Standards Alliance. I first want to thank PCE for their commitment to developing stronger diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion standards. But with advancing both DEI and workforce policy language comes an inherent responsibility to uphold the principles of environmental justice throughout all aspects of clean energy procurement policy and practice. And that extends to meaningful engagement with communities to ensure that our transition to clean energy does not further disproportionately impact low-income communities of color already on the front lines of the climate crisis. As we outlined in greater detail in our letter sent to PCE staff and its board of directors yesterday, our alliance has developed a comprehensive policy resolution which reflects utility industry standard and best practice. And after a comprehensive comparison between PCE policy and practice and our resolution, we identified a number of critical gaps in PCE policy and practice related to, among other things, targeted hire, community benefits, meaningful community engagement, and local resilience. The DEI policy before you tonight is currently open for updates. Codifying the language as it is written now with these gaps still unaddressed for an indefinite period of time is deeply troubling, given that these standards, alongside other missing components, are each essential to a clean energy transition that would ensure a just transition for California. That's why I'm here tonight to urge, as the same as my colleague Benjamin did earlier, that the board please delay the adoption of Policy 9 until staff may return to the board with a revised DEI policy language that specifically addresses these gaps identified by our alliance. We believe the PCE is more than well positioned to set an example for all California CCAs when it comes to setting strong workforce and EJ standards. Therefore, we'd greatly appreciate the opportunity to meaningfully engage in this discussion with you all further. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Next.
I believe that would be me. And can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. So my name is Tim Frank, and I am representing the Building Trades Councils of the Bay Area, as well as the Construction Trades Workforce Initiative, which is the nonprofit working with the trades to promote access to family sustaining jobs for women, minorities, residents of low-income communities, veterans, and the justice impacted. And we've been proud to be partners with our environmental justice and environmental allies in the CCA Workforce and EJ Alliance, and stand with them today. And I would like to first associate myself with all of the remarks of everybody who's spoken already. And so I will not repeat what they've already said, but build on it a little bit. So the Bay Area is a place where the building trades actually innovated in the use of targeted hiring. This is the first place in the country where we built that into project labor agreements. And if you look at the stats over the last 30 years, we've gotten really good at it, which is exactly why you can see the kind of stats on minority participation that Dave Morrow cited earlier. We're really excited about that. We've got a success here, but we believe that this is something that should be folded in directly into your DEAI policy. The fact that it doesn't have a targeted hire component is really kind of an embarrassment for a DEAI policy in the Bay Area. And we'd like to see that done. We also want to make sure that the process-oriented aspects of EJ and community empowerment that we've associated ourselves with are also included in the DEAI policy, because that too is important. And it isn't something that is difficult to do. So we would love to work with you on filling in those gaps and then bring back to the board a policy that is actually robust and complete. The final thing I would just like to note is that though it is true that the single family retrofit market, for instance, the very small scale projects are relatively difficult, but the state of California is investing considerable resources in trying to figure out how to turn this into a high road market. And I'm actually helping lead an effort in the city of Berkeley for the building trades, working with the city and with other partners to develop a pilot project to demonstrate exactly how to turn that specific sector into high road work. So we think it's important not to give up on that, but rather to stay tuned and pay attention and be ready to try and make sure that you're following best practices there to make that a portion of high road work too. So with that, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And is it Leslie?
It's me, Alex Lansberg.
That was Alex.
Yeah,
That was.
thank you.
That was Tim.
No,
All right, we going? All right. Good evening. Good evening, board members. My name's Alex, Research and Advocacy Director for the San Francisco electrical construction industry. And we've so many recommendations from apprentices, as well as the business manager and business development director for IBW 617. So I don't want to repeat those things. I want to associate myself with their comments, with Mr. Bonilla's comments. I think I was the second person he called when PCE started going down the road with community choice, not with California Community Power. And I've been really proud to work with him and really thank him for his efforts in ensuring these things up. And again, I also wanted to associate myself with Mr. Tim Frank's comments. Just I do want to leave you with a thought about what's happening up here in San Francisco. think the work that you are doing is absolutely critical for helping us in San Francisco advance our own decarbonization initiatives. Granted that the building types and what we're dealing with in San Francisco in terms of the built environment is a little bit different from PCE, but we do share the same grid. You share many of the same challenges, and I think the things that that you implement are going to inform how we structure our own workforce policies, how we structure our own DEI policies and whatnot. So before I go, just again support the comments from the folks that you've heard, and look forward to your support as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Eric Via, sorry about pronunciation.
And please keep your comments to under 2 minutes.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Chair and board members. My name is Eric Vium. I chair the Slow Climate Coalition in San Luis Obispo, and I'll also help lead the CCA Workforce and Environmental Justice Standards Alliance. 3 quick points that I want to make. First is that it's of utmost importance that PCE has all of your practices and the gaps that we've identified adopted in your policy. Other CCAs, in particular, Central Coast Community Energy, is in the process of developing a workforce environmental justice standards policy and is looking to PCE. And so to have your values and your practices reflected in your policy is critically important. So we want to work with you in earnest to update the policy, to add targeted hire and close the other gaps we've identified, so we can work to establish an industry standard. Second is PCE's commitment to partnering with workers and with environmental justice communities is a model for other CCAs. CCAs, as you all know, are getting I'll say beat up in the legislative and regulatory arena with issues around central procurement and CPC oversight and RA resource adequacy issues. And so by adopting these policies, building relationships with labor, climate, and environmental justice organizations as a CCEA movement led by PCE, that having those sorts of strong political allies at the state level is going to help CCAs to thrive. So I want to encourage you to think strategically about how to partner with us in meaningful ways through these standards and through other efforts in order to build strong political alliances. And then finally, I just want to just support Raphael, encourage more resources so that he can work to develop even more innovative programs that can allow aggregation. And again, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Okay.
Veronica Wilson.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for giving us time to provide public comment. My name is Veronica Wilson. I'm with the Labor Network for Sustainability. We support a labor climate movement for making a living on a living planet. And I'm here to not repeat everything, but as mentioned by others in the CCA Workforce and EJ Standards Alliance, note the identified gaps, the critical DEAI and sustainable workforce related policy and practices gaps, like targeted hire, community benefits, meaningful community engagement, evaluation, selection, and local resilience. And just asking the board, thanking the board for adopting proposed shall prioritize and give preference to language to strengthen language in the other program section, and make sure to address this in policy 9, working with staff and the alliance together to revise the language and ensure that the board gives staff direction to continue engaging with us, to continue working on that as you move forward. And that's all I have to say for today. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one.
Okay.
I suggest encouraging fully distributed generation incentivized by the savings, not from needing to procure it remotely and use transmission and distribution resources to get it to the customer who is generating it. That could include incentivizing customers for electricity they generate and use themselves because it reduces the load on the grid, especially in peak hours. As public policy, the greatest good for the greatest number,
It promotes prosperity for the public. This is maximized when people convert existing vehicles to BEV where feasible and economical, and purchase BEVs where necessary. The savings are not just on the cost of electricity versus buying from the grid after the cost of the solar storage, energy management, and charging system is paid for, and the million-mile-plus motors, batteries, and solar are all free from then on. It's also the savings on operating cost of vehicles, including replacing them every so many years. The best approach to this is to recommend and incentivize maximizing solar PV on rooftops and adding to it using solar canopies over both parking and driveways so that the customer can meet the needs of both the building and all the vehicles associated with it. We are getting closer to both solar PV and non-lithium battery technology that will cost much less and have much higher performance than today's technology. So we would greatly appreciate encouragement of these policies. I forgot to mention that the IRA will provide 45 kilowatt hours, $45 per kilowatt hour of battery capacity when made in the US with North American materials. There is also the 30% tax credit for solar and other incentives regards market first. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay, I don't see any. I'll close public comment and bring it back to the board. Comments from members of the board? Yes,
I
Colleen.
would like to see the policy number 9 go back to a meeting between labor and staff. I'd like to see it then go to the executive committee for review, potentially to come to the full board, or maybe go back to another meeting between labor and staff. I think there's some things that we have to figure out if they're feasible, and staff may say certain requests are not feasible, but we need to ferret out all those details and find out what they are.
Okay, others? Jeff?
Yeah, so I mean, having participated in the executive committee meeting, I really appreciate the sort of support that we've heard tonight for the revised language to policy 10. I think and the square we're trying to circle we're trying to square there was, you know, maintaining our strong preference for union labor while giving staff some flexibility in certain cases to allow certain more projects to move forward to it. I think we've actually done a good compromise. It's both quantifiable, it's also documented. In other words, we can actually show how we've shown prioritization and preferences. It's a little harder to document best. So I think I'm happy with Labor 10. I'm happy with policy 10 going forward. Policy 9, I have a document here from which Eric and the EJ, SLO EJ coalition shared with me, which sort of, I have to be honest, it sort of lays the two out side by side. I guess my question for staff is you know, the various requests regarding policy 9, these requests. I mean, it's hard for me to tell how much work would go into revising policy 9 to meet that, and if it's sort of feasible for us. I'm just curious if there's a short answer to that.
Are you referring to the comparison document between the two?
Yes.
That's a hard question to answer. Staff would be open to meet, like I think Colleen's approach, meeting to see what is feasible, and then going from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Donna?
Thank you. So I appreciate all the public comments today. And I think a number of us here have been working on this for probably 2 years. And we've been through a number of iterations. It's a policy, it's not an ordinance. Policies are pretty easy to revise down the road. And I really feel like we have spent an inordinate amount of time and listened to an inordinate amount of public comment. I'd really like to try to approve both policy 9 and policy 10 today. And we can approve them and direct the staff to continue to talk. Policies can always be revised down the road, but I'm really concerned that if we, you know, don't act on something and get something moving along, we're sort of, you know, we actually are leaving a gap in our policy, in our program and policy, because we don't have anything approved. So I'd like to get it approved thank the staff for all the work they've been doing for the past 2 years, and just remain open to having conversations that when we do get better options for anything around labor or procurement, that we're always going to be open to making those changes down the road. And we'll review this policy at least annually. So that's really kind of my comment, just to try to wind this up based on the enormous amount of time we've already spent on it.
Okay. Well, let me make a comment. It's true that we've been dealing with this with real focus for more than 2 years, but this is really important to deal with. And to take on the DEAI area as a critical area for this organization to focus on was a really important decision for us as a board to make. And it came to us as a board as a recommendation from the CAC. You know, it really started with our Citizens Advisory Committee saying to us, you got to focus on this. We then took it on. And they just made that comment and we really took it on. It's a big deal for us. And I think it's a big deal at the staff level. For us at a board level, it's important, but at a staff level, it really changes things. And it's really important. These, both the strategic plan and the policies that we have, these are living documents. These are not static documents. I think actually we're making pretty little change to policy 9.
We're adding to it, but not moving anything.
Well, what we're really doing is we're adding the DEAI perspective into policy 9. I'd prefer to do that, but to be clear that we should engage in conversation and look at changing these policies. I mean, operationalizing these policies is going to involve change. It needs to involve change. But, and you know, we've engaged with that issue in terms of how do we get contractors at the residential and small business level over the last 6 to 9 months. And that was where that language about use best efforts and now prioritize and give preference to came from. So that was an operationalization issue. There's going to be more. I think if we don't approve what we've got in front of us now, then it just puts it to the side to approve in the future. And I'd rather approve what we've got in front of us and move forward and then work on it further in the future to improve it in the future, but not to, you know, put the DEAI issue behind us for any of the policies.
Totally hearing you and Donna, and I'm hearing the community also. Around that point, a number that I heard, I think Donna used was in a year, that might be an appropriate time to revisit it. This is just a question I'm throwing out here because your points are very well taken by me. Might it be possible to hear it sooner than a year as we're approving this?
I think it is. I mean, I think that we should continue to engage with everyone who gave public comment. We should take the feedback. They've got some, if there's some specific concerns with policy 9, we need to hear what those are and engage with them just like we've done around the policies 10 language. We don't need to wait a year. I mean, this is a living document. We should be dealing with it right now.
And
Oh, sorry, we can go ahead, but just a staff perspective, we are committed to reading with the EJ Alliance again and to they have quite a robust comparative document and they reviewed not only our policies, but also some of our practices. And so reviewing that with them moving forward. So I think there is plans to continue to meet with them just to move forward.
Back to Tim for a brief moment, we'd love to give direction to staff to continue to work with labor to quantify language as they put it, to bring back the best product possible. And absolutely favor James's amendments to make the language uniform throughout the document.
Okay. Donna, then Jeff. You're muted, Donna.
I want to thank Director Big Stick for continuing to put this at the forefront, and his comments are well taken. I chaired both strategic planning and the DEAI work that we just did. And I want to promise you that the minimum amount of review would be once a year. It has to be, really that's how you have to do it. And I promise it will be at least once a year, but we are very open-minded to continuing this work. We may need to reconstitute the committee a little bit because some people have changed, but I want to just take a moment and actually thank Michael Smith, who's no longer with us. He's moved to the East Coast, but co-chaired this with me. Sam Hindi, Carlos Romero, and Rod Madrigal, who all three, all of those gentlemen were huge contributors, and also the consultant that we hired. It's been really 2 years of long, hard work, and the staff. Thank you all very much for the work, and I really appreciate the staff's willingness and open-mindedness to work on this.
Yeah, I want to address James's amendment. I will ask the same question I asked previously about the language, the prioritizing preference language. If we apply to the program language, that doesn't place some undue cumbersome impediment on staff in terms of the programs?
We'll defer to Rob.
Yes.
I think where this may be trickiest to implement will be in residential programs. The scenario that's running through my mind is programs where we need to have a single consistent contractor who at one time is willing to move sofas, punch holes in drywalls, run a circuit, and patch up the drywall and paint it. Rather than have 4 or 5 different contractors coming through, which would be extremely disruptive to the homeowner, particularly again, when we're working with underserved communities. Now, if we can find that contractor, we will hire. However, it has been challenging to find contractors willing to do the entire job in a number of scenarios. So, we did have the dialogue, as Dave Morrow mentioned, around EV charging. That was a really valuable dialogue. We really appreciated all the effort that IDW did. But we also, in talking to contractors, learned that some contractors don't want to do engineering. Others require doing the engineering, and they won't accept engineering done by somebody else. Customers are looking for the contractor to do the permitting. And so that places us in a very difficult situation if we are designing programs that create a great deal of friction for the customer. So it's not about friction for us, it's about friction for the customer, where really our concerns would be most significant. And so that's where we would, encourage the board to really look at this from a customer perspective and how we deliver effective and really meaningful programs to customers with that plan.
Thank you, that's all. That's it.
I just want to highlight what Rob Neal said, because from the customer perspective, I've heard from some residents who are concerned about how many people have been traveling to their home, how they have different time needs. And I think it's very, very important for a smooth customer experience and support for the program to do it.
Carlos.
Yeah, so I just want to point out, everybody says we should be working with labor on EJ stuff. There are clearly statewide EJ groups out there that are working on this. Labor, with all deference, right? This is not an area of specialty for labor. So I think that indeed we should, and there are EJ groups that have put together, environmental justice groups that have put together, whether it's SLO, Let's Green California, there are a few others, there are several others. And I think that those are the folks that are really going to be including in the strategic discussion around their 4-page there's some things I agree with, there are other things I don't. I think they're actually missing some pieces. Electrification is all about the economics. Right? This does not address the economics. Even the EJ is not good at addressing it. right? Whether it's a subsidy, whether it's a greater issue of taxation, whether it's a general carbon tax that we all say, look, we gotta figure this out. I think that's grossly missing from this particular document, but whatever, those are maybe big macro issues. But all I'm saying is I think let's include labor in the discussion, but let's not leave out the valuable groups that have actually contributed to that document, that letter. Because they need to be at the table, I think, and actually have some issues on participation that probably should go to our advisory. Right? I mean, how do you get representation? People of color, TQ, the whole thing on those committees without 14, right? It's not a question. So anyway, I just want to make sure that we include the EJ groups that could come forward in coalition with labor to move forward with the policy over the next year, if that's where we go. Because again, different perspective, and guys.
I just want to echo the thanks that you gave to staff for sure, to the subcommittee who's been working on this and the DEIA, and then also to all the public commenters. We took a really deep dive into policy 10. I feel like a really deep dive, and I feel like it's fully baked at this point. With the understanding that we can come back at any time, and the relationship is going to continue, and all the things that everyone has said. I think right now our decision in my mind is, do we go ahead and move forward with both policies, knowing that staff is committed both in their staff report and verbally here to continue to working with EJ on policy 9. I don't know that we've taken that deep of a dive as an executive committee or even at the board to start making changes right now without, I don't think I get the full picture of what the consequences will be for those changes. Hesitate to put it on hold though, because it might take a little bit. So I guess maybe just if we could bring the discussion on, do we take both of them tonight? I definitely want to move on policy 10 tonight, or do we delay it and come back to it on policy 9?
Right. Why don't we move on policy 10 and then take policy 9, just take it off the table.
Jim? I mean, policy 9 is in place today, so I would actually be okay with these, even if they fall short of our end goal, I would personally would be happy to say, why not make it better now with the understanding that we definitely want, there's some complications, I love this document that SLO gave to us, SLO gave to us, but it would take me a long time to understand, but I would be happy to actually face the changes around the table right now, all both policies. And with the understanding that it's not finished, it's just another step in that direction.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, this is a living set of documents, and I don't think we should approve any changes where we don't see exactly what the changes are. We see what the changes are that staff has recommended to the strategic plan, to policy 9, and to policy 10. And I mean, that it's only progress to approve those, and then we should take any other comments. I mean, we should take any comments anyone has on any of our policies and improve them every single place that we possibly can. There's no reason not to. James.
I think right now we're at a point where we have so many people at the table. We have so many expressions of so many people's minds in the EJ community and the labor community with us here. I'm okay with passing an improved policy 9 version tonight, but maybe we can give everyone in the room here a timeline, say this, I don't know what's reasonable, like maybe 3 months. Within 3 months, we will bring it back, have the meetings with the executive board, with the DAI committee, and within 3 months, we will have another version here at a meeting. I think we do want to move, we don't want to rush, but we do want to move fast because, as mentioned earlier, there are a lot of other CCAs throughout California who are looking at us for guidance when it comes to these policies.
Thanks. I concur with James absolutely, but I want to kind of do acknowledgement to Donna for her leadership, leading the DAI subcommittee and staff for all the work that you have done for over 2 years, and the board obviously, and the executive committee for doing all the work. I mean, we have made a lot of progress, and what I'm hearing today is we're going to continue to make even more progress. I appreciate the fact that staff has worked collaboratively and productively with labor and continue, the commitment is to continue to do so as we continue to build on the work and the progress that we have made. I appreciate the apprentices sharing their stories with us today. It's really kind of, for me, it emphasizes, first of all, it's the right thing to continue to support labor and apprenticeship in our community, as also for the PCE specifically, it kind of highlights the fact that it's in our best interest also, not only is it the right thing to do, but also in our best interest to continue to strive to achieve our goals of having clean and sustainable energy throughout. We need the infrastructure and support from these folks who will make that happen in the future. So I certainly don't want to see that work that has been done not get approved today, but at the commitment of a certain short time frame to bring this back and continue the conversation, I think is critical.
Yeah, it's good.
I'd like to move to approve the diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion DEAI related amendments to the strategic plan and policies 9 and 10. Should we say the thing about the 3 months, or if staff has that noted?
I think that's direction. I don't think anybody objects to that.
I second. Is there an
Thank you,
amendment for, sorry, for the clean energy programs to include the prioritizing the preference to?
We should see exactly what the language change is before we approve it, but that's something that should be done right away, is look at where we can change the program's policy. But I think we need language in front of us that says this is going to be the change, not just a general change. Okay,
So
did I get a second? Was there a second? Oh, Rod second.
So the motion was just that, as written here in our staff and the staff report, to approve diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion related amendment to the strategic plan and policies 9 and 10.
Okay, so that includes the relatively minor, or the minor changes that have been made to the policy.
10 is labor.
9.
9 is me, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, okay,
What Shannon presented,
yeah, okay, with this.
with the understanding that we're going to continue to look at it, that these are
Yeah.
living documents and it's going to come back to us in a relatively short period of time.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second. Can we take a roll call?
Is there a second?
Yeah, Rod said.
Okay.
Yes.
San Mateo County,
Yes.
San Mateo County, Atherton,
Yes.
Belmont,
Yes.
Brisbane,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Yes.
Daly City,
Yes.
East Palo Alto,
Yeah.
Boston City,
Yeah.
Hudson Bay,
Yes.
Hillsborough,
Yeah.
Los Banos, Menlo Park,
Yeah.
Millbrae, Pacifica,
Yes.
Portola Valley,
Yes.
Redwood City,
Yes.
San Bruno,
Yes.
San Carlos,
Yes.
San Mateo, yes, South San Francisco,
Yes.
and Woodside. And motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Shana, you did an awesome job. Chan wants to make a.
So I would just like to reiterate, I'd like to thank the DEAI subcommittee, Donna, Rod, Sam, Michael, who's not on it anymore, Carlos, for your time. It has been a huge effort, and staff, in particular Shana, Kirsten, who I believe is on the screen, Mark and Raphael, who've been working hard with labor and the labor and EJ community for working with us. It's been a huge effort, and it's been a huge focus of our staff. We've already spent, one of our all-staff get-togethers was focused specifically on DEAI, and I appreciate you going ahead and approving both policies, including policy 9. The old policy 9, existing policy 9 is 2 sentences. And so this new one is much more comprehensive and adds things in that the committee, the subcommittee wanted to make sure was included. So I appreciate that, and we will continue to move forward. We've heard your direction that you'd like this to continue to be a high priority, and it will be. in our organization. So, so thank you very much for your support of what we're doing. And, we're trying to do the right thing, and I think we're doing it. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the discussion of net metering 2.0 and the transition to net metering 3.0. Where we stand on.
Nobody wants to hear about that.
It's a job.
Thank you. This is just going to be an introductory conversation. This is meant to just sort of level set the where we're at right now in the universe of net metering. We're not going to get into the details quite yet about going forward for the next iteration of NEM policies, but just for level setting where we're at right now. Yeah. So for tonight, we're going to talk, I'm going to give a little bit of a history of net energy metering in California and a high level overview of the new NEM 3.0. And then more to come in the future. We'll bring back some policies or options around retail fulfilling and credit options for future solar customers. We're not going to get into those details tonight. The next slide. So just to give a little bit of a history, net energy metering, NEM, refer to it as NEM, has been the policy in California for over 20 years with regards to interconnections for installing a customer-sided behind-the-meter solar or wind system. We're just going to talk in the realm of solar right now because that's mostly what we're talking about. NEM 1.0 was in effect from 1996, and then it was continuously reapproved, slightly modified, cap was raised over and over again. It was finally sunset in 2016, 2017. The ending date actually transition is different for each investor-owned utility territory. In PG&E territory, it sunset in December of 2016. That's when PG&E reached their interconnection capacity under NEM 2.0. In SoCal Edison territory, it actually was in effect all the way until July of 2017. But what NEM 1.0 did was promoted proliferation of rooftop solar by offering very generous policies to encourage homeowners to install and make an investment in a solar system in their home, also for businesses. Their tariffs, the rates that were in effect during that time frame were very favorable for customers to install solar and to export a lot of energy during the day. Very high benefits for pushing out solar energy or getting credits for solar energy that was generated during peak solar times of like noon to 6. Some of you may recall being on the E6 rate. If you were a part of that, that was a very generous rate for a long time for folks who installed their own solar system. There's also a 12-month net metering, what we call sort of its credit charge aggregation. So you could earn credits at a retail rate, carry them forward for 12 months, and have them apply to energy consumed at a different time of the month, different time of the year. And then you had an annual true-up, with PG&E where that was settled out. And so that looked at the year-long energy consumption and generation of your solar system, and that is how you were. That is what the economic sort of benefit or how it was calculated on the year-long production of that solar system. And then those agreements came with a 20-year term with the investor and utility. So you signed a contract, and the basic structure of that contract was in effect for 20 years. So with NEM 2.0 came into play in 2017 and was in effect until just a couple weeks ago, April 14th. A lot of the stuff is still the same with regards to a 12-month credit and charge aggregation at that retail rate, 20-year interconnection agreement. A couple of new things were introduced in NEM 2.0.
primarily the types of tariffs that you had to sign up for. You had to, you were required to sign up for a time of use rate that had peak and off-peak rates that were very different from the older tariffs. So you were given less credit for energy produced during the day. That was the off-peak times. And the energy costs more during that peak time of 4 to 9. So that's similar to the time of use rates that we have today and affect regular customers. If you were installing a solar system over the last 6 or 7 years, you had to pick a time of use rate that roughly modeled that sort of structure, where you had a lower incentive to export energy during the day, and it costs more to consume energy in the peak evening hours. You still have the 12-month time frame in order to sort of net out your credits though, and every kilowatt hour that you push off to the grid was credited at the retail rate that you would otherwise have purchased that kilowatt hour for. Go to the next slide. Now, with the implementation of NEM 3.0, there's no immediate changes for current customers. So anyone that already has a solar system installed right now, I should have also included here anyone who submitted their interconnection application prior to April 14th, but doesn't yet have it installed, but you had your application accepted prior to April 14th. None of these new rules are going to apply to you just yet. You still have 20 years under your current agreement. And so none of the new solar rules apply to you right away. Where that could change is if you make modifications to your existing solar system. So if you modify something about your existing solar system, you increase the size of that system, you make some sort of change about that system, then you can trigger an early transition into a NEM 3.0 contract. But if you don't make changes to your system, you have 20 years at your current agreement. And then the process for transitioning customers over from the old legacy NEM agreements into the new program for NEM 3.0, that still has not yet quite been developed yet. There are a handful of customers that are going to be potentially transitioning right away. Folks that had their solar systems installed in the early 2000s, who never commissioned that system and signed a new NEM 2.0 agreement. If they still are sitting on a legacy solar NEM 1 agreement, that agreement could be expiring quite soon, and they would be transitioned right into NEM 3.0. The details for how that's going to work is still being developed right now, so I don't have anything additional to share at this point in time, but we will get some of that in the coming months. Go to the next slide. So what is NEM 3.0? It's the new solar interconnection policies for our solar systems applying after April 14th, 2023. And it has several names. So NEM 3.0 is what most people refer to it as initially. Net metering 3.0, because it's the third version of interconnection agreements within the state of California. That's really sort of a misnomer though, because we're moving actually away from net metering, which is giving that one-to-one retail credit for energy that's consumed or generated from your solar system. So the CPUC actually refers to this as the Net Billing Tariff Program, or NBT. So if you see communications from the Public Utilities Commission, they're going to say NBT or Net Billing Tariff, most likely. The utilities are shopping this as the solar billing plan. The marketing that's going to come from PG&E is going to refer to the solar billing plan. May also a little bit refer to NBT, but they're trying to shop it and market it and brand it as the solar billing plan. So if you see any of these terms, they're interchangeable and they're all referring to the same thing, roughly. I'm going to try to use NBT as much as possible, because I think that's the language that the CPUC is going to be pushing out, and I think that's going to be the most common from the regulatory perspective. NEM 3.0 is still gonna be widely used by the industry though. Installers are probably gonna be like bought into NBT or solar billing plan. So just as a point of information. So per the CPUC, the new policy changes are intended to now, whether you agree with these intentions or the outcomes, that's up for debate. But this is what the NBT is intended to do from the CPUC's perspective. They're intending to credit excess solar generation at the grid value, not the retail rate. So they are assigning a different value to every kilowatt hour that you push back to the grid versus if you were gonna pull that kilowatt hour from the grid at the same time. They want to charge NBT customers for grid electricity based on high differentials kind of use tariffs and encourage solar plus storage installations, primarily to encourage shifting of loads and shifting of exports to the evening hours. So they do not want to, by policy, by design of this program, want to encourage customers to install solar systems that export energy during the middle of the day. We've all heard about the negative value of solar in the middle of the day. From on the procurement side, it's the same issue on the retail side from customers. The CPUC does not want to encourage people that are installing a solar system at their home to install a system that's going to intentionally push out a lot of kilowatt hours during the day, in the middle of the day, which is why the compensation for those excess kilowatt hours is much lower under this program. And they are encouraging solar storage to help mitigate and encourage exports to happen in the evening hours when it's more expensive. The intent of this program is also to promote equitable access and benefits of solar for low-income customers. Lots of studies from advocacy groups, other stakeholders, a lot of comment to the CPUC about how the net metering policies over the last 20-something years have been disproportionately favorable to higher income individuals and not and disproportionately negatively impacted lower income folks. Whether or not that is demonstrably true or not is, you know, up for, I think, debate a little bit, but that is the what is the CPUC is responding to when designing these programs and designing incentives around the lower income customers. And they want to support what they call sustainable growth of solar in California. The program is designed intentionally to make the payback period for a residential solar system longer than what it has been. Under the current net metering policies, NEM 2.0, the payback period for most customers, they've calculated is somewhere in the 3 to 5 year period, where the next, 10 to 15 years of that solar system is essentially sort of cash positive, right? CPUC does not feel that that's sustainable. They feel that that's over incentivizing a residential solar installations. And so the design of the incentives and the policies for this program is meant to push the payback period out to roughly 9 or 10 years, which they think is a more reasonable and sustainable payback period for a solar system, where it's still beneficial for more than half the life of the system, but isn't over incentivizing the proliferation of solar. Let's go to the next slide. So here are some of the major differences for residential customers in the NBT program. ELF is the only qualifying rate plan that you can choose. So right now, under NEM 2.0, there are several time review plans you could choose from. But under the NBT program, ELF, which is the electrification rate, is the only rate plan that's available for PG&E situated customers. The ELF program does have a higher differential cost for peak and off-peak rates. It also has a higher monthly fixed charge, $15 a month. So as mentioned earlier, we're reducing compensation for excess generation, no more retail credit. There's a new mechanism that's coming into play called the Avoided Cost Calculator, the ACC, to calculate an hourly value of a solar export. So that assigns a different
value to the export of that solar kilowatt hour every hour of the day, every day of the week, every month of the year, and also differentiates by location. So there's a potential within the calculator of like 586 different values for a solar kilowatt hour throughout the year. Every person doesn't need to track that. There's some modeling around what the average price looks like. It's much lower than a retail credit right now. During most of the day, it can get to the higher credits in the evening hours, especially during summer and heat wave. That's potential. But for most customers and throughout most of the year, it is a lower credit during for exporting. There is additional incentive built in to the ACC if you install a storage system along with your solar panels. So you can, get a higher credit in the ACC calculator if you install storage along with the solar. That higher incentive is meant to account for the higher cost for the battery backup and to also help keep that payback in that 10-year timeframe. There's also a larger incentive for low income character customers to allow for that payback period to stay in that sort of 9 to 10 years, since they have a naturally lower cost of power that they're offsetting with the solar system that has a higher there's a higher incentive payback for the ACC calculator for the character customers to keep the payback period equitable. And then customers can oversize their system up to 150% of historical loads if they attest to load growth over the next 12 months. So if you're attesting to, I'm going to start charging an EV at home, I'm going to replace my gas water heater with a heat pump water heater, I'm going to do other electrification measures that are going to increase my electrical load at my home, and therefore that's why I need a solar system that's up to 150% larger than what I historically have been using for energy. And then the MBT customers, this is a big difference. MBT customers will be charged monthly for their energy consumed, no more large annual true-up statements. So right now, as most of you guys know, we charge monthly for our solar customers. So if a customer consumes energy on a monthly basis, they have to pay for their generation cost monthly. They still are on an annual true-up with PG&E. On the MBT program, all charges, the IRU charges would also move to monthly. They move away from the true-up. And what does this mean for PCE? All PCE customers who did not submit a solar interconnection application by that April 14th deadline would be subject to these new policies under the net billing tariff rules. We're still responsible for setting our own compensation rates on the generation side. So we don't necessarily have to follow the ACC calculator and the ACC payouts that the IRUs are following. However, it's not clear how flexible we're going to be able to be in moving away from that. We're still waiting for some details from PG&E and how they're going to deliver the billing information to us, how we might be able to present charges differently on our side of the bill and still have them align. The same team at PG&E, the same team at PG&E who's responsible for implementing all of these new rules was the same team that just had to process 50,000 applications over the last 3 months for to close out NEM 2.0. So it's the same team that was responsible for both items. So they've been 100% pretty much absorbed with closing out NEM 2.0, and now they're starting to transition over to focus on the billing operations and requirements for this next iteration. And even if we were to do, because there's been a couple of board members about, well, what if we, did something that was more like an M2 or retail credit on our side of the bill, would that still, be helpful for customers? It could be, would be a little bit helpful. It would give a little bit more credit than moving to the ACC value, but they would still be subject to those lower payouts from on the PG&E side of the bill. So it would be pretty nominal in terms of total impact that you would have in terms of giving a retail credit. We're not gonna be able to make up the full sort of gap and encourage people to, you know, and give more credit that would make them more like an M2 customer. And then there's gonna be more to come over the next few months as we learn more and evaluate our options. So this is not our only presentation on this. This is just a very introductory presentation on where we're at right now. Happy to take some questions if you have them.
Colleen.
Leslie, thank you very much. Question that I've been asked.
Yeah.
Customers who are going to be grandfathered under NEM2.
Yeah.
You said if they change their system, it triggers them going into NEM3. Changing the system definition, because there are residents we have in our city who wanted to add battery, couldn't get batteries in time, whatever. Does that constitute a change?
It can, you know, it can. I think there's still some of those rules that are being evaluated as to how you can impact. I do think people might be able to add just a battery and not change anything else about their system. I'll ask that question of the PG&E team. But I know that they're trying to draw a hard line on what is going to trigger moving, you know, an early sort of transition over to NEM3. You definitely will not have the option like you did in the NEM1-2 thing where you could have like two. There was an option if you had a NEM1 system, you could sign a second interconnection agreement under NEM2 and like have like two, basically, you know, have a whole new solar system that was under NEM2 and still maintain your NEM1 policies for this solar system. That's not gonna be an option. You're not gonna be able to do that, for sure. But what the total parameters are and the changes are gonna be nominal to be able to keep that NEM2 categorization. It's gonna be limited, but I'll ask that question.
I'd say there's three parts to that question. One is whether a battery would change it.
Yeah.
The second is whether a change in the inverter would change it. And the third is what level of change in the solar panels would change it? Because I've been told if it's more than 20% of the solar panels that you're increasing, then it gets changed, but there can be, what I was told was less than 20%.
Yeah, I think it's less than 20%, but it's for sure you can change the inverter, because that's not changing the operation of the system or you, like if the inverter goes out, you can definitely replace your inverter. It's changing the operation of the system, like with the battery or increasing the capacity, adding additional panels. Those are, I think, there's some areas where there's some rules around that. Yeah.
What's the justification for not wanting to incentivize the transition to solar? I think I heard you correctly, that was one of their rationales.
No, it's not wanting to transition, not wanting to incentivize solar, it's not wanting to incentivize excess production of solar in the middle of the day. So it's matching, so it's doing a better job of matching generation with loads.
I see.
And really sort of diving deep into encouraging battery storage to be paired with solar so that you can better modify in the system to match what your system with what the grid system needs. The grid does not need extra kilowatt hours in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
I have the same question that was already asked about, is just adding storage trigger the change from NEM 2.0 to NEM 3.0. Selfishly, I was thinking about my own system I installed in 2018. Battery technology at the time was extremely expensive and not very efficient. So it would seem that if, you know, I don't know, you're gonna go back and find out whether that would trigger it. I would really hope that it wouldn't, because that would work against the stated policy intention of encouraging solar plus storage, because that's what customers like me would be trying to do.
Yeah, like I said, I just think there's some specific rules around it. And it may be tied to the capacity of the battery related to your solar system, or I will go ask for clarification. I'll get real good clarification on that specific question.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Yeah.
what is our enforcement mechanism on changes in those systems?
I'm sorry, the what?
What is our enforcement mechanism?
I don't, yeah, I don't, well, I don't know. Well, in terms of if you're gonna implement, if you're gonna do any changes to your solar system or any changes in adding something about battery, you're gonna have to pull, permits to, if you do any sort of unpermitted work or you do work that's interfacing with the utility grid and you don't have that approved under interconnection agreement and you get caught, that's pretty bad. I don't think that, and I'm not sure if you're gonna find a lot of electricians that are gonna go out and willing to do unpermitted, unregistered work. Because if they get caught.
You have to have an interconnection agreement with PG&E.
I think the great question is enforcement mechanism, not the mechanism at which they evade the enforcement. So are we monitoring?
We're not monitoring, because this is PG&E, so these are interconnection agreements with PG&E. We're not monitoring, this is not no one's signing an agreement with us, these are interconnection agreements with PG&E, because they are the utility that owns the infrastructure. They own the wires, they own the poles, they own the meters, you're interconnecting with their grid.
But they don't communicate that with us, correct?
No, not necessarily. I mean, we get a report of customer, how we know that we have solar customers in our service territory is because their rate changes. Right now, we know that they have solar because we get a rate change notification to a NEM rate. How we're gonna know, right now, it's actually still not clear how we're gonna know when someone is on NEM 3, because E-Electric doesn't necessarily have a NEM modifier on it currently. So we're gonna need to know if they're gonna add a NEM modifier to E-Electric, or something of that nature. That actually is a question that we have open to the utility right now, is how are we gonna know under E-Electric if it's a solar E-Electric or if it's a regular E-Electric?
Yeah. Leslie, go ahead.
Just a basic question, does your billing plan go with the system or with the owner? So if you sell your house, does the new owner get the benefit of 2.0, or do they automatically go to 3.0?
That's a really good question, and I believe that it does not live with the system. I think it lives with I believe it lives with the owner. I believe it lives with the person who signed the interconnection agreement. I don't think the interconnection agreement passes to a new owner under this current rules here. It did in the old one. Under the current rules, I believe that the agreement, so if you sell your home, and I will get clarification on that one, but if you sell your home in your system, I believe that the new owner has to go into the new solar billing plan, but I will get clarification on that. Yeah.
Carlos.
Yeah, I'm probably one of the few here that think that the NEM 3.0 change is probably good, but then I believe that, several more schemes and analysis.
How are we presently compensating, folks under NEM 2.2, and is it comparable to what a PG&E customer would do?
We're compensating at a much higher rate, so we're compensating, how we're compensating is at a retail rate plus our Eco 100 adder, our 1 cent per kilowatt hour adder. So we're compensating at above retail rate, and we're allowing those credits to stay at that retail rate through the whole year and to cash out. Under the net metering policies with the investor-owned utilities and PG&E specifically, if you have excess kilowatt hours at the end of your net metering year, those kilowatt hours are recalculated. You don't get paid out at the retail rate. They take your excess kilowatt hours and they recalculate it at whatever the net surplus compensation rate is in effect at that month when your true up happens. Historically, the net surplus compensation rate has been somewhere between like 2 and 4 cents per kilowatt hour. For the last several months, it's actually been quite a bit higher. Right now, it's like 7, 8 cents a kilowatt hour. But that's the highest it's ever been in the 15 years that program has been in place with the net surplus compensation rate.
So I got 60% of what you said, enough that asked them and then to no question, which is, we have the ability, right, to say, we will compensate you more then PG&E again.
Yeah.
To internally subsidize or incentivize is really the term.
Yeah.
More solar rooftop. installations.
Well, we could incentivize our excess compensation if we wanted to at a different rate than what PG&E is, but the reminder is that that'll only be on the generation side. And so right now, you know, PG&E does do a 1-for-1 on the T&D side. In the new world, they will not do a 1-for-1 on the T&D side. The T&D will also be at, you know, a rate that's, you know, like 90% less than what it is right now.
So it would be very difficult for us.
Yeah, it would be, yeah, very difficult, yeah.
I mean, but we still have to have the policy.
We still have to have a conversation and politics discussion about it, yeah, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I have a technical question and follow that with the policy. How do we encourage folks to push the self-generated electricity into the grid during off-peak hour?
Well, so that's what the intent of this program is.
That's what I said.
Yeah, so that, because the credit, the ACC credit is higher during the evening hours, so if you push out, so if you look at the thing, if you look at your rate and you can say, oh, if my kilowatt hours are pushing out to the grid at noon, I'm gonna get, as, you know, 2 cents worth of credit, but if I can figure out how to push my kilowatt hours out at 7, I'm gonna get 8 cents worth of credit.
Right, so that was the question.
Yeah,
It's for regular retail customers, they push the power onto the grid when it's generated. They don't have a way to delay it.
they do if they have a battery backup.
So that's the question. So that means if they were to do so, the only way to do so is using the battery. But if they have the battery and they're not generating, then they'll be using the battery for the home.
Well, yeah, so that the idea is that the battery, you would arbitrage the battery. And that is what a lot of these solar companies already do. They have programs to help you arbitrage your battery to maximize your production from your solar system and the cost of the grid, so that you only try to pull kilowatt hours off the grid when it costs the least amount. And then if you're gonna push kilowatt hours back out, you're going to get credit when it's the most amount.
Okay, so I guess if they generate sufficient sufficient power to store in their battery, they're more than likely to use it before they will push it off back to the grid, because there's still a difference between pushing your electricity back on the grid, even at the off hour, compared to pull it off the grid if they don't have enough power.
Well, the way a lot of these arbitrage programs would work and the way that it would be designed to work under NEM 3 is you can actually charge your battery from the grid power during the cheap part of the day and use your battery power in the evening hours to offset your load so that you're not pulling from the grid during the day. There are ways that you can arbitrage your battery so that it matches your load for your home to best suit you.
From our perspective as a power provider, the customer who's not using any power from the grid at 6 p.m., which is the hardest power for us to deliver, is just as valuable, almost as valuable as we're done putting power back on the grid. You know, the avoided generation at 6 to 9 p.m. and that peak is actually just as valuable as somebody actually getting up. So I mean, even if their battery is just covering their home usage during the time, it's still a positive.
Absolutely, because it reduces our,
And
our load, our cost, and our volatile. That even comes. What we try to do is to encourage more battery installations.
Yes.
So that we're a lot less reliant on the grid.
Yeah, and the simple solution is charge our, we don't want to provide power.
I mean, I would imagine they charge most likely during the day when solar is available.
Yeah, and we want to make that change.
Absolutely.
So one thing that this is going to do is push more consumption during the day rather than the off-peak hours between 9 p.m. and 9 a.m.
What's more generated during the day, not more consumption during
Both. No, but if you're generating, you want to consume it.
So.
You lose value by exporting it.
Well, either consume or retain it.
But if you've got an EV, you're not gonna want to charge it at night. You want to charge it during the day. Because that, you want to consume the power during the day.
If you're home.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not, I guess I'm just telling, passing, I guess, the information on. We can continue to have a conversation about the, value of the policy and how we want to interact with it. But this is, just the information, of how the program exists.
Yeah.
The world that we're now living in for rooftop solar.
I see this more of a way for us to encourage more community batteries. That's such a tremendous thing.
well, in front of the grid is a whole different, in front of the meter is a whole different issue. It's a whole different set of issues. This deals with behind the meter.
And just for, there, also, I know I mentioned it just really in passing, but there are tens of thousands of systems that are in the queue to be installed right now for NEM 2.0. I don't actually think we're probably gonna see a lot of these new systems being contracted for right away. I think that that's gonna take a minute for folks, both on the installer side and on the customer side, to understand what they're selling and what they're buying. Where this is gonna probably have the most impact is for new home development, where you're required to install a solar system, and it's not, it just comes with the house. And so people aren't necessarily making a decision to install it or not, it just comes with the new house that gets built. And that's probably where we're gonna see the most uptick or the most sort of proliferation, at least in the early next couple of years, is in that market, which we don't have a lot of in San Mateo County, but we do have more of in Los Vegas.
Okay, great. Thank you, Leslie.
There'll be more conversation on this, that's another one.
Yeah, it's a good start.
Chair Bolia, do you have a public comment on this item?
Okay, and I didn't take public comment, so I will do that.
It's an email that I'm reading again.
And go ahead.
Is from Mark Rose. I'd like to comment, starting with a question. If we slash the cost of installation of solar and storage systems, are they going to cater to the IOU business models by further reducing what they pay to consumers for electricity exports to the grid? We should fight such a move tooth and nail. The plan is to put in perhaps 3 times as much as needed for residential to cover the entire use by vehicles. That would vary by the number and uses of vehicles for each building. The purpose is to flip the business model from monopoly to supporting universal ownership as needed to make that work. The old business model is no longer needed enough to justify granting corporate charters in the original historical system for chartering corporations to meet specific societal needs. I would very much like CCAs to counter the intentions of the IOUs by providing side incentives for maximizing distributed generation and what Germany calls self-use, as well as smart microgrids and mini grids if that is legal. The grid should be for marginally supplementing renewable energy, not for paying economic rent to IOUs. CCAs can help make sure everyone has what they need to get through storms and other situations of solar not fully meeting their needs. The person who mentioned self-use is correct, and it should go farther than that for maximum social and environmental benefit. Regards, Mark.
Okay.
Sorry. If inadequate stationary storage charge during the day, example at work, if ample storage charge at night. That's it.
And I'm so sorry, but I do have an answer to the question of batteries. My team member Justin very kindly dug up the exchange about this from a previous meeting that we had. So the response from PG&E on this question said, does replacing your panels mean you become a NEM 3.0 customer? If you're replacing your panels with like for like equipment, meaning the same size rating or less, you can do so without affecting your NEM legacy status. You will still have 20 years on your original PTO agreement. What about expanding your system or adding a battery to your system? You are able to expand your system up to 10% or 1 kW without affecting your NEM legacy period. You can add a battery at any time. It will not affect your NEM legacy period. There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
Okay, the last item on the agenda is board member reports. Dr. Jess.
Very briefly, and I'll bring it up again in a month, June 3rd, the circus is having its Gay Pride Parade. If there's any indicator, you might want to beat the Emma, help us celebrate.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just Councilwood City tomorrow, St. Carlos, everyone will be here. See you there.
I just want to thank Chair DeGoya for responding to some rather controversial editorials in the Daily Journal. I was jumping up and down, and then a day later, there you were. So thank you. Very time.
I'll second that, and I read it before looking at who wrote it, and I, oh, this is really good. I looked at, oh, that's fine.
Yeah, well, the original editorial had pretty serious inaccuracies about PCE. And it was our marketing staff that came up with that he was not just from PG&E, but also Enron.
Right.
Which was made a point of pointing out. Yeah. Any other member reports?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Long meeting, but
They know that he was actually there at the time when they died.